Good evening and welcome to Monday, May 6th City Council meeting. There was no work session. Kelly, will you please take the roll?
Yes. Mayor McEachern.
Here.
Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Here.
Councilor Tabor.
Here.
Councilor Cook.
Here.
Councilor Denton.
Here.
Councilor Blaylock.
Here.
Councilor Bagley.
Here.
Councilor Moreau.
Here.
Councilor Lombardi.
Here.
And would everyone join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we get to the proclamation, I wanted to just call out two things. First, this is National Teacher Appreciation Week. I want to extend heartfelt gratitude to our teachers, and I think there's something that you notice, certainly in school you appreciate teachers. I'm sure my children do, but as parents, realizing that you spend a significant amount of time not with your kids, and things like all the things that they learn, small and large, and that you find out sometimes through the teachers, not necessarily through the children. It's a trust that is earned through just countless hours, but we appreciate the work that you do in helping shape the next generation. So thank you to our teachers. I'd also like to take a moment to appreciate National Police Week, which falls on May 11th through the 16th. National Peace Officer Days, both were created to pay special recognition to law enforcement officers who lost their lives in the line of duty. I'd like to take a moment to honor the role of law enforcement in service to society by recognizing the sacrifices and valor of law enforcement and the efforts of our own police department in educating the community and making it safer for those who serve us, for all of us. We're going through a pretty long conversation in terms of the police department. We've had in terms of the new building, as well as the chief of police, and it's a saw them at Children's Day. They were out there during the Mayor's Ride, and it also happens to be National Bike Month. And for those of you who were inconvenienced by the police shutting down Route 1 for 15 to 20 or so bikers in the rain yesterday, they do a lot for the community and in that community to make sure that we all get to do the things that we love to do and do them safely. Just take a minute to appreciate National Police Week. So with that, we have a formal proclamation for the Poet Laureate, and it is when I found out, and it wasn't until I think I was on the council that I found out that we had a Poet Laureate of Portsmouth, but Dianelli has done such a fantastic job, really risen the level of this this title. I know Tammy Truex before her during COVID. It is an honor, and I think befitting of a city of Portsmouth to have such a title, and really excited to be able to share what comes next. So, whereas Portsmouth affirmed the importance of arts, cultural, and history on the occasion of our 400th anniversary by creating a new Arts and Cultural Commission, a public art review committee, and a revised cultural plan, we understand that our community benefits significantly, both economically and spiritually, from the enrichment the arts provide to residents and visitors alike. And whereas great poets have found inspiration in Portsmouth for centuries and have lent their voices to illuminating our darker sides and the angels of our better nature, and whereas during National Poetry Month in April, institutions including the Library of Congress celebrated National Poet Laureates from New Hampshire such as Robert Frost, Donald Hall, Charles Simic, and Maxine Kumin, and whereas Portsmouth established the National Poet Laureate Program in 1997, honoring outstanding local poets, among them founder Esther Buffler, penny poet Robert Dunn, troubadour John Perlotte, and pandemic poet Tammy Truex, with the opportunity to build community through poetry by creating events that feature area poets and encourage a love of poetry among people of all ages. And whereas outgoing and 13th Portsmouth Poet Laureate Dianelli Antigua ensured that a poetic voice continues to be heard throughout the seacoast, inspired young people to look to the future and hope and determination, and remains the Poet Laureate of our hearts with a podcast, Bread and Poetry. Now, therefore, I, Dago McEachran, Mayor of the City of Portsmouth, on behalf of the members of the City Council and citizens of Portsmouth, do hereby proclaim Lauren W.B. Vermette Portsmouth Poet Laureate for a 2-year term, and I urge all Portsmouth citizens to get to know the work of our Portsmouth and New Hampshire poets and to explore poetry in all its wonder, and for the enjoyment, inspiration, and insight and encouragement that poetry affords, given with my hand and the seal of the City of Portsmouth on this 6th day of May, 2024.
Thank you, Mayor. May I say a few words about Dianelli's term?
Would love to.
Okay.
Or would love to hear them.
Yeah. Mayor McEachran, Assistant Mayor Kelly, City Councilors and staff, invited guests. My name is Mike Nelson. I'm the chair of the Board of Trustees of the Portsmouth Poet Laureate Program. On behalf of the PPLP, I want to thank the City Council for once again making this ceremony part of the proceedings. As you were saying, the Portsmouth Poet Laureate Program was founded in '97 by Nancy Moore Hill, aided by Paula Race, Mimi White, and others. From that day to this, all the work of the program has been done by volunteers who contribute both time and money. We are entirely funded by individual donations and grants from the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. The mission of the PPLP is to build community through poetry. We do that in 3 ways. First, through the monthly poetry hoot, the first Wednesday of each month, September through June, which started by our second Poet Laureate, Robert Dunn, now in its 25th year. Secondly, we have the Buffler Residency, where we select a poet from the community to teach a poetry class at Portsmouth High School. And third, we select a Poet Laureate every 2 years with the help of a separate and independent selection committee made up of a diverse group of artists and public servants from this community. The Poet Laureate then works with the board and volunteers to create engaging community-building projects with poetry always at its heart. For the past 2 years, our 13th Poet Laureate, Dianelli Antigua, has been very busy. And I want to say that I have never seen anyone rise to the occasion like Dianelli has. First, she launched the Bread and Poetry podcast in the summer of '22 and released 26 interview episodes and 2 bonus episodes, and published the Bread and Poetry anthology showcasing work inspired by the podcast and workshops during her laureateship. She was one of only 22 other poet laureates in the country to be awarded the Academy of American Poets Laureate Fellowship. She was awarded the Nusrat Yassini Poet in Residence Fellowship at UNH from 23 to 25, and awarded the Black Excellence Award in Artistry from Black Lives Matters New Hampshire in April of '24. She collaborated with Haven on fundraising events, Courage Speaks for Sexual Assault Awareness Month in April 23 and 24. She named Haven the official nonprofit partner to receive $7,000 of support from the Academy of American Poets Laureate Fellowship. She collaborated with New Hampshire Panther for 2 Love and Resistance poetry and conversation events highlighting Black voices, and collaborated with New Hampshire Panther, Vida Cantina, and DJ Mam for 1 Love and Resistance poetry and conversation event highlighting Latinx voices and Dia de los Muertos. She performed poetry at the BIPOC Fest 22 and 23. She delivered a creative mornings talk on the theme of sanctuary in January of 23. She moderated panels and facilitated workshops at Sea Change Artist Conference at Green Acres in 22 and 23. She gave the keynote address at the Mass Poetry Intercollegiate Poetry Showcase in April 24. She will be delivering a TEDx talk this Friday at the Music Hall on the theme of being human. She launched the Bread and Poetry Project with the support of the Academy of American Poet Laureate Fellowship. facilitated 4 free poetry workshops, 3 of which featured guest instructors, all of marginalized identities. And she advocated for more hoot readings with poets of marginalized identities, and a long list of readings and community outreach that we invite you to go to Dianelli's page at pplp.org to read more. Dianelli, you have more than fulfilled the PPLP's mission to build community with poetry. You have shown the full potential of poetry to go out into the world and lift everyone up. You have done us all so proud, and you will always be the Poet Laureate of our hearts. I am so pleased to welcome to the podium the 13th Poet Laureate, Dianelli Antigua.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor, Council, board members, family, and friends for attending this joyous day of celebration. In 2022, I became the youngest and first person of color to receive the title of Poet Laureate of Portsmouth, a historic and life-changing moment. I was and am still humbled by the opportunity of being an ambassador of poetry to this lovely city. It has been a great privilege to serve this community and bring poetry to its people. Since the beginning, it was my mission to uplift marginalized voices. And during my term, I invited more writers of marginalized identities to participate in the Hoot Reading series, bringing new stories and new perspectives to our ears. I created the Bread and Poetry podcast, which was inspired by the poem Like You by Roque Dalton, which states, "I believe the world is beautiful, and that poetry, like bread, is for everyone." The Bread and Poetry podcast makes poetry accessible to all in a way that nourishes the soul and provides listeners with the very tools needed to write poems of their own. Just as bread sustains life, I believe that poetry has the power to do the same. I had the privilege of interviewing a diverse group of guests where we talked about such important topics as mental health awareness, racism, survival, body neutrality, faith, and love. It was beautiful to witness how conversations about bread opened the door to vulnerability, which is the foundation of poetry itself. During my laureateship, I was honored to receive a generous fellowship of $50,000 from the Academy of American Poets to further my projects as Poet Laureate. With this incredible funding, I then launched the Bread and Poetry Project, which is a 3-part approach to honoring and supporting the past, present, and future of poetry in our communities. I partnered with organizations like Haven, New Hampshire Panther, BIPOC Fest, to name a few, to actualize social reform through the lens of poetry. Even though my official title only lasted for 2 years, I know that my work within the Seacoast region and beyond has just started. The podcast will continue. My partnerships will continue. I will always spread the message of poetry's transformative power, especially in a world marked by violence, genocide, and inequality. Poetry can be a tool for hope, connection, and strength. Poetry has been a salve for me as I've navigated my own journey towards healing. I've been so grateful to have the support of this community through these 2 years. Poetry is indeed the future. And thinking back to Roque Dalton's poem, Like You, he sums it up best when he says, "And that my veins don't end in me, but in the unanimous blood of those who struggle for life, love, little things, landscape, and bread, the poetry of everyone." Thank you so much. I remain, as always, Poet Laureate of your hearts. Thank you.
Thank you, Dianelli. Your contributions to this community are immeasurable, And on behalf of this entire community, I thank you for your dedication in building community with poetry. And now, I would like to introduce officially to you all to our 14th Poet Laureate of Portsmouth, Lauren W.B. Vermette. Lauren's hairstylist once asked her if poetry was her hobby. She replied, "No, it is my identity." Lauren has been a part of this poetry community for 11 years and has participated in everything. During COVID, she hosted and held together the Hoot Poetry Reading on Zoom and on many occasions hosted Beat Night, both readings now in their 25th year. Above all, Lauren is known to everyone in the community to be kind, dedicated, and an incredibly compassionate listener and champion of all the other voices around her. Lauren is not only a member of this community, not only a builder of community, she is a cornerstone of this community. And now our 13th Poet Laureate, Dianelli Antigua, will pass the quill, emblematic of the Poet Laureate program, to our 14th Poet Laureate, Lauren W.B. Vermette.
Thank you so much, Mike and Dianelli. Thank you, Mayor, City Council, PPLP board members, family, friends, and fellow poets. I am both thrilled and humbled to serve as your 14th Poet Laureate. In Buddhism, there is a practice known as loving kindness, wherein you send thoughts of goodwill to those around you, wishing them to be free from suffering. There are not enough words to express my gratitude for this opportunity you have given me to extend loving kindness to a community who works tirelessly to alleviate suffering in all its forms, the staff at our local hospitals. Over the next 2 years, I invite our poetry community to join me in a series of workshops on the theme of gratitude, with the goal of writing poems in praise of the hospital staff who have had an impact on our lives. These poems will then be collected into an anthology to be given to our local hospitals. I also hope to bring poetry into our local hospitals as a poet in residence, encouraging staff to play with language as a way to de-stress. In hospitals, they give you a warm blanket to soothe and calm, and that's what I'm hoping our words will be, because that is what your words and welcome have been for me. In closing, I would like to share a poem I wrote, which weaves in the teachings of the Zen Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh with my own words. The Art of Compassion. Let your heart bloom like the crocus unfurling its petals to draw in light. Do not be afraid of the snow with its cruel cold. Push gently until you break through its tough crust, and know that in time it will melt and become the water you draw through your roots to grow. Compassion is like this too, a drawing upwards, an opening of the heart, a knowing that love is possible. Do not be afraid, because compassion is there in the touch of a hand on your shoulder, your elbow, your wrist. It is a reaching inward, outward, a seeking, a finding, a looking into another's eyes and saying, I am here for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. We are thrilled to have you as our new 14th Poet Laureate of Portsmouth, and we can't wait to work with you and see all the amazing things you accomplish. And thank you once again, Dianelli, for your amazing and impeccable service to poetry in this community. Our thanks to the mayor, council, staff, volunteers, and all who helped create this evening's celebration, and all who helped build community through poetry in Portsmouth. For those watching at home and later on YouTube, to learn more about Lauren, Dianelli, and the PPLP, please go to our website, pplp.org. For those who are here, please join us now for the reception in the conference room to welcome our new Poet Laureate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. PPLP, Dianelli, Lauren. It is you can leave and go have a bigger party and conference today, and that will be totally acceptable. I just want to thank this organization, Dianelli, for all the work that you have done for the community. Lauren, for all the work that you will do for the community. This is a community that really loves the arts, and we're a great community because of that. We try to build a better world here through the help of the community in the city of Portsmouth. But in order to build a better world, you have to imagine a different world, and you guys allow us to just to get a glimpse of a different world than the one that we inhabit. So thank you for all the work that you do. It's not an accident that the city of Portsmouth is such a great city. It's not in spite of the arts, it is because of the arts. And thank you so much for being a caretaker and agreeing to be that caretaker in the future. So thank you all, and go have fun at your party. Wish you could come. So next up, we have the acceptance of minutes. Kelly, you're on a tear here. There's no falling behind at all. We have the April 15th, 2024 minutes.
Move to accept.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Recuse.
Oh,
I was absent.
Oh. We have one recusal, no opposed, 8 in favor. All right, next up, we have the recognitions and volunteer committee reports. Recognition of renewable solar energy proposals from the Portsmouth Middle School 8th graders, all who sounded smarter than I did, certainly at 8th grade, maybe now. We are going to, don't quite know the order, so we're going to go through, we're going one by one through these, and we're all going to present them. I know that we've read them in advance, and we have a couple of things to say, but Councilor Denton?
And one thought is if Chris Rose, who's one of the 2 8th grade teachers, along with Nicole Stonerook, I know couldn't be here tonight, if you want to say a word or two about the assignment. If not, I could summarize it. Did she? That's awesome.
All right.
I can talk in front of teenagers, but I can't talk in front of adults. But Chris can lead.
We're all rooting for you. So just,
Yeah, no pressure after presenting
literally
after
no
2
pressure.
poet laureates.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Well,
no
they
pressure.
left.
No pressure at
guys.
all after that. So, so Nicole and I work really closely together every year to teach what seems like a very dark and often hopeless topic of global climate change. We go through the data, we teach the science, we do a number of experiments with our students so that they understand what's the cause, what's the data. This isn't something that's theory anymore. It's proven beyond doubt. But it's not enough to just teach that. We want kids to be hopeful about what solutions are. It's one thing to identify a problem, but it's a whole different thing to think about, well, how do we solve it? And, I know tonight's not about Ms. Stonerook or I, and, whether it's Teacher Appreciation Week or not, we have some pretty remarkable young people in this community that had ideas like, I think a couple years ago, you were questioning whether you were smarter than a 5th grader. You were trying to figure out that show. And there are many days where I wonder if I'm smarter than the 8th graders that are in front of us. But they really are very astute. They really are very hopeful. I don't think they're old enough to be cynical yet to think why stuff won't work. I think they believe why things will work. And we did a lot of work to not only teach the topic of climate change, but to present, well, what are solutions? What are things that we have right now in the year 2024 that other communities, other states, other countries are employing? And one of the big things in both a movie, a documentary we watched, and a book that we referenced is solar. It's not the only answer. These students know that. They presented what some of the challenges of solar are. But they also saw in their community that schools in Oyster River and Dover have made huge investments in this renewable source. And I think they wonder, why don't they see it here in Portsmouth as well? And I'm not saying we're not doing things, but I think they wonder, when we learn about what can be done, why does it look like we're not doing enough? And I think that's based on all of us. None of us are doing enough to face one of the biggest challenges the planet sees today. So speaking on Ms. Stonerick, and I'm sure she has something to say, really want you to consider these 13, 14-year-olds' ideas, because I believe they're better than the ideas that I could come up with, and I do believe that I am not smarter than an 8th grader, and many times I'm in class with them. So thank you for this opportunity and for considering some really astute plans from our young people.
Thank you.
And I just want to say that I'm so proud of the students that we have behind us. This was a 2-week project where these kids were really looking at how we can implement solar on these buildings. And so we were doing research. They were teaming up with a company called Revision, and they really put thought into these proposals. So the fact that they get to stand in front of you and present these ideas, it's special to them. It's special for Mr. Rose and I. And I don't know, it's so hopeful for us and our city. So thank you.
Thank you. So we have the first presentation of Wyatt Howard Baker and Benjamin Fisher.
And my thought would be for each of us to speak to the one assignment, what we thought was good about it, if we had any questions.
Okay, so we're going to do that now. So we're not going to go
Correct.
through. Okay. So great. So I'm up first. So Wyatt and Benjamin, you're here this evening. I just want to. All right. So one, love that you chose City Hall and the police station. You may or may not be aware, but we are planning a renovation of the police station. We're going to likely keep it on this site if we move forward. So the timing is excellent in terms of bringing that to fruition. The cost is always up on this side of the dais, we're always trying to figure out how do we make the cost appear as low as possible. So one of the things that I think would be helpful in this, given that the city makes decisions on 50-year time horizons, 100-year time horizons, how can we look at that initial cost as our return on investment of that cost over a specific number of years, and not just the initial cost, but weighing the cost that we would defer in terms of energy that we'd be using here, energy that we could sell back to the grid, and also the amortize that over a number of years and see this as a capital improvement plan. Would love to have this conversation, because I think there would be not only myself that be supportive of this, but many people throughout Portsmouth that would say, hey, as long as we're going to be doing the work, and we might as well be thinking of the future. And I think that there would be a way to save money and predictably show that this would be not only a good investment for our future, but a good investment in terms of present taxpayer benefit, which I think would align to that. So would love to see you guys present this again more fully as we have the discussion, broader discussion with the police station development here, to carve out some time at a work session to come back and talk about potentially including this as a part of that. So that's an open invitation to come back and have that conversation. So hell of a job. It was a pleasure to read, and I agree with your teachers that you got a passing grade, an exemplary grade of 30 out of 30 on that. So thank you so much for the effort that you put into it. Portsmouth will benefit. All right. Next, we're on to Jasmine Parker and Jessica Schickling. Did I pronounce that correctly? She's not here, but Jasmine is, and you are Jasmine? Perfect. All right. The assistant mayor has some feedback for you.
Yes, hold on, I need to pull up my notes. Give me 1 second. That I have.
And in Councilor Denton's defense, he did say like 1 or 2 sentences and not to talk for like 10 minutes. So if this goes longer, that's mostly my fault and not Councilor Denton's, so bear with us.
Okay, where are my notes? So I first want to commend you because the detail that all of you put into here was really remarkable. You clearly did your due diligence. Talking about as recent as the flood changes, the increase of Portsmouth temperature on average. You guys really went back and did a lot of work there. I think that the building that you talked about putting solar panels on makes a lot of sense. And community campus, when we, as the mayor said, we always are looking at long-term projects and long-term planning. And as most of you know, and as you guys obviously know, because you wrote it in here, talking about how that is a new purchase. And so now really, to me, it was a good time to think about, okay, well, what do we want to do with this building over the next 30 or 40 years? Sorry, he just really was
I spoke too
flowing.
long.
I know.
Yeah, took it long.
Sorry, look at this. I thought it was really great that you were talking about the comparison, that it's not always absorbing. So you really took an account of cloud coverage, nighttime, seasonal changes that we have here in Portsmouth, but still came out, in me, when I read it, with the mindset that this still can be really beneficial for our community. I think it was really great that you talked about that, how we're just one small city, but we can really make a lasting impact. Because to me, that shows me that how much Portsmouth is a leader in our community, and that we have to do things sometimes first, or be really bold in those actions. So I'm going to be shorter than the mayor, but I'm really proud of you too. It was really great.
About the same.
I don't know. If
Pretty
that was
easy to
much.
be shorter or less long-winded than me. Next, we have Councilor Tabor giving feedback to Sarah Edwards and Abby Craig.
Are Sarah and Abby here? Hi. Yeah. First of all, I thought you did an excellent analysis of the carbon problem and what global warming and sea level rise means to us right here in Portsmouth. I thought you really brought it home to us. As we've seen in the last 5 months, it's dramatic. You guys had proposed a solar array on a carport top at the Hanover Street Garage for about $737,000. It was an exciting proposal, and I thought, Councilor Cook and I on our Energy Advisory Committee, and we've been learning a lot about solar, it may be that a project like that would qualify for some federal funding for the first 30%, which opens the possibility that that we could take the initial 30% paid by the federal government and borrow money, which the city has the ability to do, and the amount we would pay every year to cover our bond would be less than we would get saving energy. In other words, it'd be cash flow positive for us. And after we paid off the bond, all of the savings would go to the city, which we could apply to our total electricity bill of about $3 million. So I looked at it as a great thing to do, and maybe there's a way that we can partner with the federal government and actually make it financially advantageous as well as reducing our carbon footprint.
That's awesome. Laura Lee Foster and Elizabeth Tremblay, are you both here? We have one. Oh, okay. Both sides. All right. Counselor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I was really impressed with this proposal. Once again, you've tackled the idea of putting solar panels on City Hall and the police station roof. And this is a very good time, as the mayor suggested, to be talking about this, because we're talking about a potential new police facility, which would mean we have a great opportunity to make sure that we build a green building. And that's in accordance with our new green buildings policy here in Portsmouth, but that we also consider solar panels on that roof and on the roof here. So this is, as the mayor said, extremely timely. What I really liked about your proposal was your comparison that you made to Hanover, and talking about Hanover's goal of being 100% solar, using their goal of 100% solar by 2030. So we have some competition here in New Hampshire, and that's really clear from this proposal, is that we have to do a lot more work to keep up with Hanover. And that's something that I had learned over the last few years working on community power with Councilor Tabor, that Hanover was kind of leading the way. But this proposal really brought that home in suggesting that and saying, look, Hanover's already done this on City Hall, on their police station, and why haven't we here in Portsmouth? And so we have to really start considering proposals like yours very seriously, and think about ways that we can do this not in 5 years, but maybe in a year or 2 years, so that we're starting to reap those benefits immediately. I also really like the fact that you highlighted the problem being Seacoast, New Hampshire, first in some ways problem, because we're going to be dealing with sea level rise in ways that other communities won't be, because we're facing some of the greatest effects of climate change right here on the Seacoast. So I truly appreciate your proposal. I think it was fantastic, timely, and hopefully we can implement something like it very soon.
Awesome job, guys. Next up is Brandon Ganev and Charlie Rudig. Are you both here tonight? All right. And did I pronounce your names correctly? Ganev. All right. That's with a name like McEachern and Deglin. So Ganev. Okay. You are going to get some feedback. Man himself, Councilor Denton.
So
You can go on 10 minutes.
That's.
Councilor
I
Denton.
definitely will not do that. But before I speak to your proposal, Brendan and Charlie, I just wanted to give a quick public apology to both Nora Quigley and Elliot Blenkinsop for their proposal not being on the agenda tonight. You guys had proposed let's see if I get this right, 1,229 solar panels for Little Harbor for a cost of only $776,000. And I plan to have that under my name at the next meeting, but by no means do not feel like you need to be here for that. Just want to make sure that you knew that we all are going to review that project. But with that said, going back to Brendan's and Charlie's, I like that you guys went big, to say the least. You went big first by stating up front that the climate is boiling, and then later on in the project by proposing 20,000 solar panels around 20 square foot apiece for the Jones Ave lot over where the landfill is. And for a cost of $40 million, but again, you went really big with this proposal, estimating it would provide electricity for up to 10% of all of Portsmouth homes. So kudos to both of you for going big on that. And I definitely like that you added this sentence in there that although this would have a relatively small impact on climate change overall, it's still doing everything they could with that property. So again, great job with that, and I'll end there.
Thank you, Brandon and Charlie. Next is Thea Hartley. Are you here this evening? Did I pronounce your name correctly? Taya Hartley. 0 for 2. All right, you will have Councilor Blaylock giving you feedback. Taya.
Taya, thank you so much for your proposal. Taya presented or proposed 2,691 solar panels to go on Portsmouth Middle School's roof at a cost of $3,302,163.50. I like that you did your homework. I trust that your math is correct. But no, I love this proposal. That's a big roof. You know, I know originally we built the middle school in the 1930s, then we expanded in the 70s, and then expanded again in 2008. So I think that would be a great place to put them. I see you've included here some reasons. We've compared Massachusetts, Maine, and New Hampshire. Taya's pointed out that Massachusetts currently provides 20.1% of their electricity through solar. Maine provides 4.9% through solar, and New Hampshire only provides 1.2%. But looking at those numbers compared to our neighbors really tells a story that we need to do our part. So Taya, to you I ask, well, she also mentioned that this could incite a whole new generation of solar energy enthusiasts, influencing solar technology in the city of Portsmouth, 6th through 8th graders, teach them to care about the solar energy in Portsmouth and beyond. And I think that is a great thought. I think you are correct in that. My questions would be, is the building inspector okay with covering the whole roof? And then how many years would it take in savings to pay for the $3 million? If that would be a nice number, I think people would appreciate knowing. But thank you, Taya. I appreciate your proposal.
Excellent. Next up is Madison Whittaker and Lily O'Donoghue. And we have Councilor Bagley.
Thank you.
I don't think either are here, but I'll
Oh, they're not? Okay.
Well, Maddie and Lily, they proposed putting solar panels on the roof of the high school, but they had a lot of interesting research. One of them was that Germany is the country that uses the most solar, and New Hampshire gets about 33% more sunlight than Germany does. Interesting to note that the latitude in New Hampshire is lower than that of Germany. Berlin, I think, is I forget which Canadian city that it's along with on the latitude lines, but they're much further north than New Hampshire, so it's good to have that pushback when people say we don't get enough sun here. We're not Florida. The other thing they talked about is if the city owns the solar panels, we'll have direct control over how the power is used, and we'll be able to save money on our electrical bills. And they also talked about the disadvantages, in particular for Portsmouth and New Hampshire, highlighting the cause of the effects of climate change on the ski mountains and the wintertime activities that we have, and then also the rising sea levels that we have here in Portsmouth at places like Prescott Park and some of the residents that live down near the shore. So I think it was a great presentation. It's a great idea, and it was well researched and backed with a lot of data. Thank you.
Excellent. Next up is Ella Weissman and Lucille Reinsmith. Are you both here?
Neither are, but I'll do the same.
Okay.
I'll relay back to them.
Excellent. We have Councilor Moreau.
I'm always impressed by these presentations. This is not a strong suit of mine when you start to talk about renewable energy, so I feel like I learned something new from every one of these reports that I've read over the last couple of years. They proposed to put 1,394 panels on the Little Harbor School. They talk about its location, its ability to not be covered by trees, and all of the great stuff that you have to talk about in order to show that actually could be useful. They claim it could come out with 64,606 kilowatts of power, and to the tune of only just a little over $1.5 million. So I do think that that's a possibility, and I appreciate all of the strategies. That one of the things they talked about, which I would have liked to have a little bit more information on, was they talked about Dover had recently, when they built their new school, put solar panels on the roof. It'd be great to know how that is going, whether or not it actually gave them, what they were anticipating when they installed it, because then that's the kind of feedback that would help sell it on a city level as far as, yeah, here's a school, they did this project, they actually put the solar panels there, and now, they are actually getting the output that they had hoped. So that would be a really great supportive piece of information to have. and I really appreciate all the work the kids do. Well done. You're definitely smarter than me.
All right, and then last but not least, we have Councilor Lombardi giving feedback on Hannah Williams and Anya Pettigrew. Are you both here?
One is over there.
We got one. And who are you?
Hannah.
Hannah. Very nice.
Okay.
All right, Councilor Barty, take it away.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, actually all of you, for these presentations. I think that you've done an amazing job doing the research and doing the calculations. It's pretty impressive. I thought that your research was really well done, and frankly, I thought your writing skills are amazing. You know, I wish I could write that well. I think that the high school is an appropriate location, and one of the advantages of it is that you'll be going there. And so you will be able to come back to us and say, where are our solar panels if they're not there? So I want you to do that. I hope we can do this project for $14.5 million. We could generate, I lost the number now, but a huge amount of electricity. I really appreciate your discussions of other ways of getting green energy. I thought that's very important to recognize hydro and wind and tide. But I also want to remind everybody in the room that right now, tonight, you can have 100% green electricity through community power. And so that's just another thing we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lombardi. And thank Councilor Denton for working with Chris and Nicole, or Mr. Rose and Ms. Stonerock here this evening. I just wanted to thank you and all the participants that put a proposal forward. I think that we take a lot of time on the council level to hopefully engage. We've had Student Government Day. We funded a skate park. It's really important to see the next generation become citizens, and you become a citizen when you are involved in your government. I think that if you look at the events of the world and you feel helpless, it's a really depressing thought. But recognizing that you have agency, and what I mean by that is the ability to change the world through working through your local government, your local community, to make the world a better place. It should be an uplifting feeling that we can do hard things and we can collectively make a better future. These were words. I hope that you've been encouraged to make sure that, you know, it takes probably 7 times for us to hear anything, and to come back and continue to push this with the police station, with the schools. There's a CIP. I expect all of these to be, you know, you can put in capital improvement programs in the CIP. These qualify. Most of them are over 10 grand, all of them. And so making sure that this is not the end of your engagement, but the beginning of the engagement, I think not only benefits everyone that's come here, but it will benefit the city of Portsmouth. So thank you so much for putting the time into these. Thank you, Councilor Denton, for organizing this. Thank you, Chris and Nicole, for being such exemplary members of our teaching community. When it happens to be Teacher Appreciation Week, it should not just be 1 week, but an entire year. And thank you for the students for having the faith in your community that you will be listened to. It is our job to make sure that we are worthy of your attention. And so thank you all. And you don't have to stick around for the rest of the evening. Obviously, you have homework to do, but we thank you so much for being here this evening. And Next up, we have public comment. First on the list, Cynthia Harriman on the topic of solar and the HDC. Cynthia, the floor is yours.
Wow, really hard act to follow.
It is.
The poet laureates and the teachers and the kids, but here I am anyway. My name is Cynthia Harriman, 57 South Street, Portsmouth. For the last 47 and a half years, my husband Lou and I have lived in and worked to carefully restore a 250-year-old house. I'm a fierce supporter of preservation and served on the HDC, including a stint as chair from 1980 to 1983. I wasn't going to speak tonight because I talked to you guys in January or whenever it was, but as you say, you know, you have to hear things 7 times. And also I was reacting to a letter that was in the paper recently that said, preservation versus solar panels, I choose preservation. I think we have enough polarization in politics today. I'm here to say it's not a choice between preservation and solar. We can have both. We can have our solar panels, or have our cake and eat it too, have our solar panels and preservation too. As Portsmouth considers the best way to incorporate solar panels and other modern facts of life into our beautiful historic city, I'm here tonight to urge the City Council and the HDC to keep in mind the difference between preservation, the original intention of our historic district ordinance, and subjective aesthetic preferences, which were specifically not included in the original guidelines. I'm deeply grateful that the HDC exists to ensure that individual buildings and the overall street scale in the historic district can be passed on to future generations. I'm also deeply grateful to live in a democracy, in the live free or die state, where we respect individual opinions and preferences in everything from our choice of clothing to our choice of house color. I walked around the South End yesterday snapping photos of blatantly non-historic individual expression in my neighborhood, photos that remind me that the South End is not a museum, but a vibrant living community. That letter in the paper said, you wouldn't want solar panels in Colonial Williamsburg or Sturbridge Village. And I said, no, but we don't live in a museum. Photos that illustrate the many reasonable and appropriate exemptions already in the Historic District Ordinance, allowing swing sets, trampolines, paint colors. You could even do it pink with purple polka dots if you wanted to. Wouldn't be historic. RVs, sweaters on trees down the street here that we were passing on the way to City Hall tonight. All sorts of things that, like solar panels, do not cause irrevocable damage to a building or irrevocable changes to a building, and yet would never have existed in 1750, 1850, or 1950. Over the years, in a good faith effort to clarify its decisions, the HDC has increasingly narrowed what is acceptable in the historic district. This narrowing makes HDC's job much harder as more and more totally revocable issues get added to their agenda meeting after meeting. And this narrowing also contributes to backlash against the HDC, which puts support for preservation at risk. We need to allow our city to continue to evolve with the times by emphasizing true preservation over museum-like perfection. In closing, I would like to thank the HDC and the Planning Board for collaborating on possible ordinance changes. The draft in today's City Council packet is encouraging, though still unclear in some very important aspects. I also applaud the City Council for keeping this issue moving forward toward a timely vote. We are fortunate to have caring volunteers working to make Portsmouth the best city it can be. Now let's deliver for these kids, huh?
Thank you, Cynthia. Next up is Carrie Veltrout for the Portsmouth Historical Society, also on solar panels. And did I pronounce your name correctly?
Votro.
Votro. Okay.
Close enough. Good evening. I agree. It's not solar versus preservation. The two can coexist. And Portsmouth Advocates, the historic preservation advocacy arm of the Portsmouth Historical Society, requests that the council move to postpone first reading of the Chapter 10, Article 6 Ordinance Amendment until the June 3rd, 2024 City Council meeting to ensure that the language proposed by the Historic District Commission and the Planning Board can be considered simultaneously. The Historic District Commission, Planning Board, and city staff have worked diligently over the past 2 months to craft draft language that reflects industry standards and preservation best practices for successful integration of rooftop solar technologies into the historic district. By providing by right exemptions for certain installations and increasing administrative approvals for others, The proposed language outlines a path to reduce the regulatory burden on applicants while maintaining the district's architectural integrity. We ask the council to meaningfully consider the recommendations of these two volunteer land use boards and to postpone first reading on the proposed ordinance amendment tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Next is Stephanie Campbell on memorial plaque for Joan Christie. Did I get that correctly? Is it
Joan Christie,
Yeah.
yeah. My name's Stephanie Campbell, and I live at 1001 Islington Street, number 39. And I'm the one who is requesting that you accept this donation, and it's because Joan Christie was a lifetime resident of Portsmouth. She loved Portsmouth, and she gave back to Portsmouth in many ways, but most especially as a city librarian. And as you may know, librarians are good listeners, and Joan was one of the best. And if you came into the library looking for something, she was welcoming and would help you find it. And I speak not just on behalf of myself as her friend, but this is motivated from our book group, of which Joan was a member. And so our book group feels that seeing a memorial plaque and tree in front of the library as we come and go would be a wonderful way to remember and honor Joan, not just for us and all those who knew her, but even for those who did not know Joan. It's a wonderful reminder of how much librarians help us. So I just hope that you'll accept this donation of the plaque.
Certainly will. Thank you. Next up is Sue Polidora on the topic of the HDC.
Hi, Sue Polidora, breaking on the microphone here. Middle Street, Portsmouth. And I already spoke regarding the HDC regulation and solar panels on a previous meeting, but I just want to reiterate. I happen to think that we need to preserve the historic district as is. I mean, it's all about preservation. We have, let me just read you what I wrote so I can keep my thoughts together. The HDC oversees the most valuable 2% of the city of Portsmouth. And the number could be 2, 5%. We're going to double check that. Guidelines should be given to property owners within the historic district as to the kind of properties that would qualify for solar panels, depending on whether the location is suitable for them. Homeowners should be then should come to the HDC to obtain final approval. Removing the HDC from the approval loop would only create an environment where a personal interpretation of the rules is allowed. And this being the case, is the HDC prepared to issue removals of solar panels that are placed outside the authorized guidelines? That would not go over well, not a good PR move. If the city wants more solar energy, they need to concentrate on the remaining 98% of the area that would benefit the most for this initiative. We just heard that the kids have a lot of suggestions, all of them involving this building, the new police station, schools, and what have you. That sounds very sensible to me. Any situation placing the HDC issuing or overseeing anything involving the historic district is a mistake to deny them access to approval of these things. I would like to ask, please leave the historic district alone. You have 98% of other properties in Portsmouth that you can work with. If your goal is to have solar energy, alternative issues of power, leave the historic district alone. I can't picture what if a Moffat Ladd House decided to, as the previous speaker said, put painted polka dots all over it. I mean, they should be entitled to do it, but it's like, This is not what the historic district is. This is not history. You've got to preserve preservation and historic preservation, and whatever comes with our modern times needs to coexist, but preference to preservation. We only have that 2%. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Next up is Christina Ray, solar panels. Christina, I'm sorry, I can't read the...
Christina Lusky.
Oh, Lusky.
Christina Lusky, 94 Odeon Point Road, Portsmouth. Portsmouth has been listed as one of America's dozen distinctive destinations by the National Trust for Historic Preservation because of our historic buildings. This past January, I read a review of a book of photographs by Joshua Pravhochik, who was a fan of New England towns. This photographer-author stated that the drawback to the port city is never wanting to leave, since 4 hours wasn't enough time to photograph our city due to its abundant historic architecture. I fear that if this city council strips the Historic District Commission of its ability to have some control over the placement of solar panels on historic structures, our city's architectural treasures, which the photographers so admired, will be endangered, as will be our designation by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Historic architecture has the power to make us feel transported to another time. The inappropriate placement of highly visible modernistic solar panels on older buildings has the potential to destroy this power. Solar panels can enhance the appearance of contemporary buildings, but they can detract from the aesthetics and the authenticity of historic buildings and their surroundings. Imagine a tourist coming to visit Strawberry Bank, expecting to see an authentic, recreated village from centuries gone by, and instead being confronted with huge numbers of bright, shiny, futuristic-looking solar panels. Think of the impact on tourism and on Portsmouth's financial health. HDC members are bending over backwards, sincerely trying to meet the City Council more than halfway by revising guidelines and streamlining their procedures. Why not see how these new procedures play out before rushing to strip the HDC of its power? When this council's members ran for office, you criticized the previous councilors for treating longtime city employees disrespectfully. But now that you are in power, your fellow councilor Lombardi has criticized some of the rest of you for treating longtime, hardworking volunteer members of the HDC disrespectfully. We should be grateful that the HDC wants to preserve the integrity of our historic district. If you make the wrong decision, the harm done to our historic downtown could be greater than anything an oversized McIntyre project could have done. Homeowners want to do as they please with their properties, but when a person purchases an historic home, with it comes the moral responsibility to preserve the property's character for posterity. Remember that there are many alternate ways to increase the sustainability of older buildings, and that the HDC only bans solar panels in a very limited surgical way, and is in fact creating exemptions. You were the council of Portsmouth's 400th anniversary. Don't be remembered for diminishing over 400 years of our architectural heritage.
Thank you, Christina. Next up is Esther Kennedy on the budget and the HDC.
Good evening, Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. And as we know, the budget was presented this past weekend. A bunch of us went through it. And I just wanted to bring your attention to a few things before you get started, as you start thinking about it. One of the things is that if we really want affordable housing, we need to keep our budget low. As someone who is a landlord, when my taxes go up, my rent goes up. And, you know, there was a shortage of housing when I moved here in 1987.
And at that point, there were some landlords who were willing to keep it lower as the budgets were going up. And they were very kind. I'm not sure right now we have those kind landlords. So if we really truly want to have a budget, we can no longer have budgets to go up, from FY23 to FY25 by $12,436,000. We can't have that, folks. You need to look at this budget and really understand it. We cannot, from 2022 to 2025, add 42.42 positions. It's right in your paperwork. Positions cost a lot of money, and the question is, why do we need those positions? Is it because you need those positions? We're growing? We're not growing. Or is it because people are incompetent and you need to put more people in? Those are the questions, the hard questions you folks are going to have to ask yourselves. And I encourage you to do it now before you sit through 6 hours in one day, and also before you sit through a public hearing at night the same day. That's a lot of budget in one day. I don't know how you're going to do it and come back with accurate information in your minds. I also would like to bring up the ACC. I request that you give them and allow them to keep their power. We're looking at 11% of the city. The one thing you always see, whether you're in the airports or whether you're at Concord, what represents Portsmouth but the picture of our historical community and waterways. There are around me, there are solar panels. There are solar panels on an island. There are solar panels across at my neighbor's house, but you can't see them from the street. So they have done their job. They've done a nice job. And I would encourage you to allow them to continue to do their job. And I know we're going to be talking about it again, but those are just thoughts I'd like to put out there so that you have time to mull them over in your head. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Next up, Peter Huda on solar panels and the HDC.
Good evening. Peter Huda, 280 South Street. I think we just had a great presentation and a great bunch of proposals by 8th graders. And as I was listening to what they were saying and where they were putting this, I didn't hear of any that were in the HDC. They did a great job. The only thing that was possibly in the HDC is Little Harbor, and that had to be on the south side, so it would not be visible. I am not against solar panels. I am against the visibility in the HDC. The HDC is only about 2 to 3% of the city. To keep or preserve our historic character without the historic district in Portsmouth, we'll turn into just another coastal community with restaurants who didn't have the diligence to hold on to what made us important. When you buy in the historic district, and I speak from experience, you take a responsibility to preserve the historic character of the whole building. So you can't see what is in the back. Anybody who does this should be aware of this. We go through all kind of hoops to keep everything historic. Anybody who has done anything on their house knows what kind of scrutiny we go through for windows. So I ask you, if Newburyport can do it, Milton, Mass, and you can't see it down there, why can't we? Why do we have to be different? Or maybe we should just put a sign on I-95. If you want to see a real historic seaport that didn't get ruined, go down to Newburyport. I urge you, no visibility, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. Next up, Paige Trace on the topic of Portsmouth.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Paige Trace, 27 Hancock Street. Every once in a while, you're tasked with doing something that's good for the city, that's right for the city. of stretching a little bit to really, really understand that you can have the best of all worlds if you work just a little bit harder at it. Now, I too sat on the HDC. I too served with a group of great volunteers. And sometimes it's just listening to what someone is asking for. Sometimes it's reaching out a little bit more and understanding that to reach out more, you need to reach out less. You need to control less. You need to let a group of very involved, highly educated volunteers do their work and leave them alone. Let them determine what's visible for the general public and what isn't. You all took an oath. You all took an oath to do the right thing for this city, to protect it. Protecting the city is protecting the Downtown National Historic District. And understanding that you don't just get it and then wreck it. You need to do what's right. You need to let the HDC do what they do best. Don't overreach. Don't try and take their job away. They've always done it well. It's been messy, but they do a good job. Now leave them alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. Seeing no hands on Zoom, that's it for public comment. We're moving on to...
Your Honor, I'd like to make a motion.
All right. Okay. Councilor Denton.
I motion to pass first reading and schedule a public hearing and second reading regarding solar energy panel amendments to Chapter 10, Article 6, Section 10.633.20, as presented on the June 3rd, 2024.
Second.
And I know I've said numerous times that the reason why I'm pushing this is to allow property owners to do whatever they can within reason with their property to try to mitigate climate change, although it won't have an impact on the big picture. It's still allowing them to do what they can. The reason why I'm making this motion tonight is there's really no difference between these two motions, other than one is delaying and the other one's keeping the ball moving forward. And here's how this logic works, and here's how I'm going to ask, why I'm going to ask everyone to support this. At first reading, amendments can be made here tonight. If this passes here tonight, with any amendments, it goes on to second reading at the public hearing. Amendments can be made there. Any amendments which the HDC and Planning Board are working on can be made there, and they'll simply, if they pass, it will require a second public hearing. However, if they do not pass, then we don't need to have a second public hearing. We could still move forward with the ordinance. So this is the normal progression which we take, is we pass first reading. If we make amendments, that's great. We go into second reading and we pass amendments. And if there are substantive amendments made, then we simply do a second one. We don't restart the process. So I think that's pretty straightforward. That's how we've always done it. As long as I've been on the City Council, the only difference is amendments can be made at first reading. And I'm sure we are going to speak to the amendments which are currently being worked on by the HCC and the Planning Board. I do have some questions and critiques on them, but I'm sure we'll get to that. And just because we're talking about it now, I just wanted to let people know that on the agenda, I do have under my name the most recent New Hampshire Supreme Court case. I'm going to butcher this. Mojalaki Holdings v. City of Franklin. This is the Supreme Court decision which came out last month regarding a land use board decision denying a solar array, and it was overturned. And this really boils it down to the basics here, this explanation, but it came down to a lack of an ordinance with specifications. So what's currently happening might be able to be challenged with the HEC, but once an ordinance passes, whether it be the one that I'd like to see move on to second reading, or at second reading, if it gets amended, there needs to be an ordinance for the HCC to follow, or it may be overturned. Thank you.
And Councilor Denton, Councilor Bullock.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would also like to move to amend paragraph 28 to add the phrase made of materials other than slate or wood after the word rooftop. So the paragraph would now read, solar panels flush mounted to rooftops made of materials other than slate or wood of existing structures, which would not require other alterations to existing structures.
Second.
And I'll speak to that. So I am obviously the city council representative on the Historic District Commission currently. Over the last 2-3 years, we've had a lot of solar panel applications. And they've been, we've gone through guidelines. We've just had guidelines to go by, and they're somewhat subjective. So it leaves a lot of room for interpretation. So we've had several work sessions. We've had one with the planning board. We've had a couple with just the Historic District Commission. In the beginning of those, we even debated over the phrase visible from the public way. I believe that phrase is subjective. It leaves room for interpretation. You know, the Historic District Commission 10 years from now could interpret that very differently than the commission could today. So I believe in my amendment, we're making it more objective instead of subjective, referencing the materials that are actually on the roof. As was referenced before by one of our speakers this evening, the Historic District was created for preservation of our structures or our architecture. When you install solar panels on a roof, it is not a permanent change. It's not irrevocable. You can take them off tomorrow and nothing happened. They're never, you can see no evidence that they were there. That isn't the case on slate or wooden roofs. So that's why I've kept those under the HDC's purview if my amendment passes. So I believe that would be causing an irrevocable change on a historic material, therefore causing a change that can't be undone. I can't help but point out that the 19 students that presented these proposals to us tonight, one of them was for this building right here, and we're currently in the Historic District right now. Another one was for the Hanover Parking Garage. That's also in the Historic District. So under our current rules, or without my amendment and this current ordinance change, their proposals might not be even passed by the Historic District Commission. It just, you know what I mean? These 19 students, they're crying for help. I hope today we're leaders in this area. I want to set an example for other towns. Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the White House before I was born. I think he did that. I don't think he thought he was going to solve climate change with just the solar panels on the White House. I think he thought he was setting an example and being a leader. And I hope we can do that in Portsmouth.
Councilor Bullock, go Councilor Moreau. She had her hand up first, and then Councilor Bagler.
I would be against either one of the motions that have been put forward, and my reasoning is that this council voted to have the process where the HDC and the planning board could have the time to work on this. And had I been able to suspend the rules and bring forward what's under my name, we would actually be able to talk about what is going on in the update from the planning board. And I think it's important for this council to be able to hear that and talk about that before any decision is made on any first reading.
So you're still able to suspend the rules
If I can make a motion to suspend the rules and bring forward section 15D under
Second.
my name.
Certainly, but I just want to make sure that we're not disagreeing on things that don't need to be disagreed on. Councilor Denton pointing out that this passing first reading would still allow those amendments to be delivered to the council. We would not lose any time, as I understand that, because if we were to accept those amendments and changes from the planning board, I just don't want to create a conflict when one's not necessary. We would still just accept those or not as part of public hearing, and we'd be getting faster to public input, which is probably the more important part of this than us talking amongst ourselves through that.
I just feel like we haven't even been able to have the public hearing at planning board yet, and being able to get to actually have the public hearing on what has been drafted and getting that feedback would actually help us then streamline how I think that the zoning could go. And I just feel like it makes it more complicated in my mind in the way I see it going forward.
Okay, but we're suspending the rules. We'll hear about it, but we'd still have the public, like, if it passes the first, it's not like we're not passing this. It would go to public hearing here, like at the city council, but, all right, all in favor to suspend the rules? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay.
Back at our April meeting at Planning Board, we actually were brought forward with the draft amendment changes from the HDC. We had a great discussion on several of that. We made one minor change at the very end under definitions regarding not visible from a public way. There was, at the very end, or a place to which the public has a right of access seemed very much too open, and therefore we're going to have a public hearing with that specific language struck out. But I believe there is additional information. If you would allow me to bring up the chairs of both the Planning Board and the HDC, they could give us a little bit additional information, if I have your permission.
Certainly.
If Chairman Rudig, if you could just give us a little bit more background on the drafts that have been presented to the Planning Board and how you think that's going to go based off of the cases that you guys have been seeing.
Sure. Reagan Rudig, Chair of the Historic District Commission. We have taken what you said a couple months ago. We have been working very diligently. We've had 3 public hearings. I'm sorry, no, we have had no public hearings. We have had 3 work sessions as the Historic District Commission. We worked with the Planning Board. We've kind of been going back and forth with the Planning Board with our draft. But what we did was to we did some homework. So we looked at the standards and guidelines that are nationally set by the National Park Service or the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and looked at what their sort of recommendations are and guidelines for adding solar arrays or solar panels to historic districts or historic structures. And then we also looked very carefully at the National Renewable Energy Lab that Councilor Denton brought to us several years ago, like he likes to remind us. And it was a fantastic document. And we looked at that really carefully. It turns out that New Hampshire has adopted these guidelines. There were a set of 10 recommendations that were set up in this document, which, by the way, was a compilation of renewable energy organizations and National Trust, for historic preservation, other preservation organizations to put together what they saw as the weaving together of these two goals and threading that needle that we're all talking about, where we can both work with adding adding solar panels and solar arrays to historic buildings without compromising the integrity of the historic buildings themselves or their settings, and at the same time allowing some of these renewable energy sources to be utilized. So we came up with sort of a 3-tiered approach where we at the Historic District Commission could easily sort of help facilitate the addition of solar panels onto properties and try to clarify where we have guidelines that are very small. The section of our guidelines that covers this is just like one little paragraph. And after all this, I would like to move forward with the CIP to have an entire additional chapter written in our guidelines specifically on climate and energy efficiency in historic buildings and how to put that together. In the meantime, what we added an exemption, or we clarified an exemption, actually. We already had an exemption that said that roof-mounted mechanicals, if they can't be seen, are totally exempt. You can do whatever you want. And so we specified, we added the terminology that solar arrays are also included in this. So already, if you have an application, say on a commercial building downtown where you'd like to add solar panels and it can't be seen anywhere from the ground level or from what we try to define as public ways, which are public roadways, access ways, sidewalks, things like that, you can do it. You don't have to come to us at all. And then we have a separate section in our rules and guidelines where, or rules and regulations where an administrative approval can be given to projects that come before the HDC. And most of all, generally they are small projects that that are usually given to larger projects that have already been approved, and that these are minor little things, minor little additions, so they can come back to us. It's not really changing any of the former approval. But we added another section so that specifically for solar panels, if your project meets 4 criteria that we distilled from those 10 points from the NREL document, meaning that it's minimally visible, it does not do any permanent damage to the structure itself. You're not removing a dormer or a chimney or something like that in order to have the solar panels on there. If it's not popping up from it's parallel to the roof plane, it's not popping up off the roof in any sort of other way, and all of generally that it's fairly reasonably placed in there so that it's not glaringly apparent from a public way, again, in our definitions, then it's an administrative approval. And that means you don't have to pay the $300 or whatever the fee is. You don't have to come and give us a formal presentation. The planning department signs off on it, and we'll take a look at it just to make sure, yes, it meets these criteria, and you're good to go. And in fact, last week we had a great application for solar panels in the South End, where if we had this in place, they wouldn't have had to come to us. It would have been an administrative approval because it met all of those criteria. So it was a very quick and easy yes for us because we had been looking at this and we said, yep, this is totally fine. You're good. And then if there's an application that doesn't meet any of those criteria, where it is more visible that they're proposing, they're welcome to come to us, and we will work with the applicant to reach, to try and come to a good conclusion, like we do with all of our applications, where we'll work with the applicant to try and figure out how they can get their project to a yes and how they can get it done so that it's appropriate for the historic district. And so that's what we've come up with. This is what we're presenting. We do think it's a very good compromise, trying to meet both goals and still maintaining the ability to do what we do what we're tasked to do at the Historic District Commission.
I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions of the council.
Thank you, Reagan. Does Chairman Shulman have any?
Just very briefly, just talk about process. When we were here in March, I think we talked about the idea of the Planning Board and the HCC having a joint meeting and going through this process that would bring us hopefully to tonight, where that happened. We had our joint meeting. HCC had a number of meetings. We've had a Planning Board meeting, as Councilor Moreau said. We've got a public hearing scheduled next week on this topic. And in the spirit of working together, and I understand why Councilor Denton made the motion back in March, because it was very likely we might not have been able to get this work done, but we did, and the HCC did. So in the spirit of working together on this, because it is an important topic for us to work together on, let's do it as you asked us to do. Let it proceed to the public hearing next week. There's no emergency. The Franklin case that's on your agenda, I'm quite familiar with. I've been working on land use regulations for many, many decades. I won't get into the weeds on it. It's not at all applicable to what we're talking about. I can explain it if you want me to, but I'm not going to take your time.
Thank you, Chairman Chellman. Looks like there's lots of folks that want to ask you questions. Okay, we'll start with the Assistant Mayor. She hasn't got a chance yet. Assistant Mayor.
Thank you, chairs. A question, and this may be a little bit subjective, so if you can't really answer this, please feel free to just let me know. So in December, it was brought forward the Newcastle Ave request for solar panels that really kind of kick-started all of this. Given these, and I'm just trying to figure out comparisons, given these now new 4 regulations or check marks or check boxes that the 2 joint committees have worked on, or boards worked on releasing, how would that affect that applicant?
That application would have been an administrative approval.
Okay.
The only hitch was that some of the panels on the back were some were vertical, some were horizontal, and they could have easily just kind of made them a little bit more regular, and it would have passed as an administrative approval.
Thank you. One more question.
It met every other criteria.
And now, in either of your recollections, anyone who has applied or had to go in front of the HTC for solar panels, have we seen that anyone has tried to remove any of the architectural features, as you've mentioned? Is that something that you feel is common enough that it had to be addressed in the red line?
Yes and no. Sometimes when there's a total rehabilitation of a house, and they're gutting everything, and you don't really have a historic house anymore. But sometimes they will want to put up solar panels, and maybe the chimney needs to be removed. And that's hard to tell. It is subjective. It's hard to tell whether they're removing the chimney in order to put more solar panels on, or because the chimney's falling down and they want more space on the interior. It's not a regular occurrence, but it is something that we see in all of these sort of national proposed guidelines and recommendations that we thought it was important enough to put it in there.
Thank you. And then, sorry, I do just have one more. So it says minimal visibility. To determine visibility, one may consider the distance angle at which a roof-mounted solar energy system becomes visible. To me, that kind of reads a little broad. Is it meant to read broad, or because we want to be able to give leeway in that situation? Because we know, I think Newcastle Ave is a great example. You turn a little bit left going down the road, you can see something. If you're more on the right side, you can't see. So I guess my question is, where do you see, as the writers of this, that threshold?
That is kind of a difficult one, and I think we did end up, we said, well, how can we calculate minimally visible? Is it, and we did sort of leave it a bit broad because of that, because we've had several applications where you come in like, well, if you stand on the sidewalk in this particular spot, you can see the corner of one of them sticking out, and that is meant to be minimally visible. In general, it is not a very visible aspect of the building, so we've kind of left that. And those definitions, by the way, are not only meant to help guide, show what the HTC is looking for, but it's also meant to guide whoever's in the planning department who is reviewing these things to look at those criteria for the administrative approval, because otherwise, what do these things mean? So we're trying to just give more definition and give more clarity to what we're looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Dutton?
Thank you.
And then did I get Councilor Bagley before? I missed Councilor Bagley before. Going back to Councilor Bagley. Sorry.
Thank you, Your Honor. First, a question. Why are asphalt shingles considered historic and solar panels not?
Asphalt shingles at this point are historic. They've been around for 100 years. And there are plenty of houses in the historic district that are historic that were originally built with asphalt shingles.
So how long going back in time does one have to go for something to be considered historic?
In preservation in the preservation world and national, national parks regulations is 50 years. But that is, there are, so many different pieces and parts to understanding, sort of this term historic.
So the reason I asked that is prior to asphalt shingles being invented, hot water heaters on rooftops were quite common. The McIntyre building, which is on the National Preservation List, was built with solar panels. So I guess I'm fundamentally not understanding why solar panels are such a no-no in the historic district, because especially the modern ones today, they sit flush with the roof. They're not up on a bracket like the ones on the McIntyre building. And I guess I don't understand. I mean, asphalt shingles have come a long way since they were invented, and solar panels have come a long way since they were invented, quite some time ago. So I guess I'm just not understanding why asphalt shingles are this great thing for HDC and solar panels are this horrible thing in the HDC.
Solar panels are not a horrible thing in the HDC, in the district. It's all about the aspect of what the setting is. Now, I think that solar panels will come along a lot more as we go forward. You can say they've come along a lot way, but they really haven't been around all that long. They haven't been around as long as asphalt shingles. Maybe someday the solar panels will become historic and it'll be fine. But asphalt shingles are so ubiquitous, they're not a character-defining feature of a historic building in a lot of ways, but they're a necessity, and they're there, and they've been around for 100 years. So it's something that is so commonly seen in the historic district that it doesn't detract from the setting.
And I guess, going back to, and this is my last question, Cynthia Harriman's presentation, if asphalt shingles are not a character-defining part of the building, why would solar panels be a character-defining part of the building? Because they're both things that have to be replaced over time.
Solar panels are still a modern feature that is can be a very large presence to the visual aspect and the character of a building. I think that there are lots of ways and lots of examples where it can be done where it doesn't detract or change any of the character of the building. But it's the integrity of our district and the preservation of our district is more than just the physical building and its materials. It is your setting, your surrounding, the association. That's all intertwined in the integrity of a historic district. And I didn't make those up. Those are definitions that are written out there and commonly accepted as definitions that are set by the National Park Service that are defining historic districts and historic character.
Thank you.
Could I just add one quick thing? I think it's important for the council to understand that there's a big difference between the land use regulations that Councilor Moreau and I deal with on a regular basis, being zoning, subdivision, site plan, versus the historic district. And you can find this in zoning books and manuals, but the historic district regulations are much more subjective for a reason. And that's part of why you can have criteria in a historic district regulation that doesn't specify angles. And I could write that. I have written it for zoning ordinances where you can specify with very great specificity where you can see things or you can't see things and how high things can be and building envelopes and that sort of a thing. So it is really important. And that's why there's a need to place reliance on your volunteer HDC, because they interpret these things, they deal with it on a regular basis. That's why it took them the time it took them to come up with these words and these revisions responding to your request. So, but there is a big difference between what they are doing, even though it's within the zoning ordinance itself. The HDC regulations within a zoning ordinance allow and require more discretion than, say, affordable housing project.
Thank you. All right, we'll go to First bite of the apple, Counselor Tabor. We're going to leave you last, Josh. Then Counselor Cook, and then Counselor Denton.
Thanks, Mayor. I guess I'm kind of an institutionalist. In contrast to what Councilor Denton said, it would not be normal for us, for the planning board to still yet to have a hearing, and we would be discussing the content of something they would bring back to us. So I would not vote for first reading of the current amendment. I would rather start with what you've developed after it's had the public hearing. That said, you've made the big first step of, if it's not visible from the street, it's almost automatic. It's administrative, which is great. Have you looked at the situation where it is visible, but, for example, we've got black panels on a black roof matching the slope, and you're a design review board, does that rise to the level of something that breaks the design of the house?
And that depends, because at the HDC, we take every single application individually. It would be so easy to have precedents where, if it goes over here, then it should go here, and then here, and then here. It doesn't. It's, we look at every single house, and every single house is shaped differently, and it's angled differently. And so we have had applications where it's a gable front house, or New Englander, as we like to commonly call them. And so when you're driving down the street, you can see it on either side of the roof. It's very visible. However, we've had several applications that have come to us and said they'd like to put solar panels on, and we said, okay, how far back can you push it? How far back from the front of the building can you push it? And we've had success doing that. So, it's on, a lot of times these houses have, their 2-story roof up there and then a shorter L in the back. And so they'll put everything on one side of the shorter little L, and maybe like the 2/3 of the back half of the roof or something like that. And we've found that acceptable and appropriate, because it's not it's not intruding on the facade and the front visibility of the house.
The challenge for that is, for the homeowner, as you discussed at one of your work sessions, is oftentimes that lowers the output of the solar panels, which is a compromise they have to make. But this is all about compromises. Last question was, you did research Concord, Newburyport, Rhode Island. Is it correct that in those historic cities, everything has to come for a review? And
yes,
what you've developed would be much more progressive, much more favorable to solar panels than those
Absolutely.
other historic cities.
We haven't found really any other historic district that takes these sort of extra steps to make it a little bit easier. Generally, the rule is, in every historic district, everything comes before the Historic District Commission.
Thanks.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. And thank you tonight for taking the time to present to us, even though you're not finished with your work at Planning Board, especially with the Planning Board hearing. I have another question around that I don't think we've discussed, around structural integrity of buildings. I've come before the HDC, or at least my proposals have, for administrative approval several times, because I live in the historic district. And I've learned a lot about structurally what my house will support and won't support, and what I can put on my house and what is even feasible given spans of the house, or various things, and not messing with there are challenges in a post and beam house on where you can put ventilation because you don't want to mess with the structural integrity. Without the review of the HDC around solar panels, what is left as far as a review for whether or not the weight of the panel will upset the structural integrity? And I ask this because I have a neighbor who actually had a house collapse while they were trying to restore it, because They probably had a builder who didn't realize you couldn't remove a certain beam, and I know that that can be fairly common in old houses if you don't have a preservation architect or a preservation engineer.
That leaves that possibility totally open. It would be on the shoulders of whatever solar agency that was proposing to put the panels on to, hopefully they do their background research to make sure that the structural integrity of the house can hold the load.
Okay. And when you have a house that's in the historic district that's, I know my home and a lot of my neighbors' homes are within 1.5 feet of their neighbors. And so when you have concerns around structural integrity, it's not just your home, it's the neighbor's home, and so you'd be impacting several homes in the historic district if you had a major issue. How does the HDC usually address that if there's a question around structural integrity?
It usually ends up more in the hands of the inspection department than the historic district. We are not structural engineers, and so we don't usually. There are a couple of us who do understand building and structure and historic building methods, but that usually ends up going into the inspection department.
Okay. And as a follow-on to that, I know that we have fantastic inspectors in the city of Portsmouth, but I'm not aware that any of them have specific training in historic architecture periods in the 1700s and early 1800s. Do they have that specific training?
I can't speak to that with any certainty. We could find out.
Okay. I know I'm very comfortable with the idea of having, one of the things I like about coming before the HDC is that there are a few members of the HDC who do work on historic homes and have a lot of experience with the architecture of historic homes. And it's reassuring to know what is appropriate or what can be done or what seems like it can be done on your historic home, and know that you have that extra review, because I don't know that I would always trust the solar panel company and their engineer to be necessarily knowledgeable about a 1790s home and its construction. And so I do have that concern about removing more authority from the Historic District Commission. And I thought I'd also add my voice to Councilor Tabors in wanting to have that public hearing process before we move forward here at the council with anything, because I feel like when we ask public servants like the Historic District Commission or the Planning Board to go through a process for the council, it's inappropriate for the council then to act without hearing back from them. I know that it can be very frustrating to wait for things to come back. I've been waiting for a year and a half for guidelines that are just now coming back. I thank the Planning Board for going through guidelines on home occupation for artists. But I've been waiting for a lot longer than we've been waiting on the Historic District solar panel request, and that still isn't back. So I would just encourage the council to have a little bit of patience in waiting to hear back.
Councillor Denton, then Councillor Bagley.
Thank you. So I have a couple clarifying questions, but I should premise it with I am extremely concerned by what the HDC has proposed to the Planning Board, and I'll get to why. So first and foremost, administrative approval. Is that just staff reviewing it, so it doesn't go in front of the HDC?
Staff does an initial review, and they are tasked to look and summarize what is being proposed. And in this particular instance, they would look and make sure that whatever's being proposed meets those 4 criteria. And then we have, in essence, a consent agenda at the beginning of our meeting. So we will vote to approve that administrative approval. So we still get just a little bit of review just to check off and say yes.
So I guess just following up on that, people who want administrative approval, they'd still have to potentially hire someone to go in front of the HDC in case there's questions. I just want to make this clear to the council because it's not clear by how it was presented.
Yeah, just follow up on that. Like, administrative approval still requires a meeting. Is there a staff approval is separate from administrative approval?
No.
So everything still, and we could, again, the consent agenda recently, on our consent agenda, Councilor Cook removed 2 items because she needed to not vote on those, and they were voted separately. But they still, anything that's on the consent agenda can still be pulled out and debated as
Discussed.
the HDC. Okay. Is that, Councilor Cook, is that it?
I was just going to answer Councilor Denton's question because I've had 4 administrative approvals go before the HDC. I've never hired anyone, and I've never actually appeared.
Maybe the rep?
Yeah, just since I'm the one that's sitting in those administrative approvals, I've had administrative approvals go over an hour, just to tell you, and people not get what they've gotten. So I've seen administrative approvals get turned into worse than public hearings.
Just to clarify, an administrative approval can be denied. Is that, that's maybe an easier way to ask it?
It can be. It almost never is.
Okay.
Very rarely is.
But I guess I'm just for the folks, like when I hear administrative approval, I think doesn't go before the HDC, but administrative approval goes before the HDC and goes before a vote of the HDC. And even if the staff believes it to be correct and aligning to the 4 principles, the HDC has within its authority to deny that.
Yes,
Okay.
it does.
So,
Councilor Dent.
to that point, for administrative approvals, I'd be more comfortable if it was staff approval, not administrative approval. Those guidelines are let out. Second, our proposed ordinance addresses both solar arrays and it addresses, let's see if I have the terminology in front of me, the accessory elements to solar arrays. I did not see that listed in your draft ordinance, which leads me to wonder, would people who meet the definition then have to still go in front of the HDC for accessory elements of solar arrays? Because either way, I think that should be included somewhere, what your intent is.
I thought it was in there. That was one of the things that we had, is to make sure that the wires and everything that, go along with it are hidden as well. I thought that was part of our language.
It simply was not clear
Okay.
to me. And then,
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
the support structures. conduit
Associated
lines.
support structures and conduit lines are in there.
and then to the bigger point, my bigger concern goes back to Assistant Mayor Kelly's point when it comes to being minimally visible from a public way. And my concern there is, this is going, I think the best way to say this is, currently our ordinance, the only ordinance on the books regarding solar, the one limitation on it comes down to that they're not visible from a point 20 feet above the edge of the street right of way on the opposite side of the street. So that's currently what's required.
Right.
What's proposed makes it far more stringent. And there's several definitions thrown out there. At one point you say, shall be minimally visible from a public right of way, and then in parentheses say, including side-facing streets, and then elsewhere, it's a little confusing. It says not located on a roof surface that faces or is visible from a public way. Then not visible from a public right-of-way is later defined as any portion of a historic resource that is not visible from the public street, sidewalk immediately adjacent to the property. My point is, this is far more stringent than what's currently in our ordinances. So if you were to bring this in front of us and if we were to pass that language, it would make it far tougher for people to get solar in the HDC, and that goes against what we had initially asked for.
So can I respond to that?
Please.
We're in nowhere in here are we saying no to anything. This is a criteria simply for an expedited review where the applicant does not have to pay the extra $300 fee. They don't have to come and do a big presentation. It doesn't even get noticed. So it is an expedited, that's what administrative approval is. But if any of this that happens, if it is more than minimally visible, they can still come to us with an application. And if we need to refine those definitions, that's fine. We on the HDC are not, used to writing code ordinances. That's what these guys do. So this is sort of our intent, but if we need to change our language, and refine it.
And I would not be able to support the language which it's trying to accomplish. I would strongly encourage you to stick with the language which is already in the ordinance, which does not make it tougher for people to get solar.
We'll go Councilor Barty, then Assistant Mayor.
Yeah, I would say that this discussion is a good reason to wait for the commission and the planning board to complete their work.
Okay, Assistant Mayor, then Councilor Bullock.
Your Honor, if it is okay, I would love to hear from someone from the planning department, either a director of sustainability or the other Peter who just timely walked out the door. Of their interpretation of this recommendation.
I'm sorry, I missed the question on my walk down.
There wasn't really a question. More so, I'm looking for how staff feels that they would interpret the potential ordinance as proposed. I think there's confusion of whether staff feels. I was going to say, do you have a copy of it?
Oh, I had it.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first part is the exemption. So right now, staff does do exemptions, and they don't even go before the HDC. So there's a whole list of exemptions, and one of the recommended changes was an exemption for solar panels. If it couldn't meet that, then it goes on to the administrative approvals, which the way that HDC handles administrative approvals is, as you said, it's a consent agenda, and then they can pull things out to talk about them and vote on them. So I think it makes it easier for us to review them, but I don't want to pick a side here.
No, I'm not asking you to pick a side.
But I think it clarifies the language a little bit, at least from a staff standpoint, to provide it. And we've been working with the chair to go through those administrative approvals before the meeting, so we don't have as much getting pulled out, because that is an area where the meetings sometimes slow down.
Yep.
So we'll know what makes sense to put into a regular application and administrative approval.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'll just say that, yes, we've discussed the idea of administrative approvals, which
Reagan, speak into the microphone.
Sorry. We've discussed sort of the idea of administrative approvals and how they're handled, because they're not clearly defined right now. So that is also something that we're going to work with the planning department on to clarify.
Thank you.
It was Councilor Bullock. Do you have something?
Yes. So I have a couple things. I have a question for the city attorney. Is it true that we need, or administrative approval is only supposed to be for a project that has already received a certificate of approval? Currently, how it's written?
That's the way it's written. That's the language there. I'm not sure if that's what the intention was or what the practice is, but that's the language of the guideline.
All right, thank you. I discovered that in my, when I asked for legal review on my amendment, and Jane Farini was nice enough to show me I was going to make an administrative approval, and she's like, well, technically, administrative approval already needs a certificate of approval. So the way we've been doing it now isn't actually following the letter of the law. So just want to make that point. I know we talked about New Englanders or front gabled roofs. I do remember one applicant that got denied, and he's still very upset about it. But does these rules, would that change anything for that applicant on, I believe it was on a Middle Street, on corner of Thaxter, front gabled house?
Near the corner of Aldrich?
Yeah, sorry.
It's, no, I mean, because it's on a side street and would be very visible from a public way, it wouldn't meet the administrative approval criteria, but they're still welcome to come to us and work it out. We didn't ever deny that proposal. They just never came back. So we're still willing to talk to any applicant and work with them and try and figure out the best way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that applicant, I've spoken with him personally. I know he didn't want to waste any more money when he wrote he was reading the writing on the wall and saw that he didn't have the votes to get his solar approved. And he reached out to me, as a very concerned citizen. So I just want to make that clear, that all front gable houses have not been approved by the Historic District Commission. Has the language presented, has that been up for legal review? Has anyone, has the legal department looked at it at all?
That's
briefly
part of the process here, yes.
All right. I just want to remind everyone, I had 3 goals when I brought this forward. Was to kind of clarify things, make things easier for applicants, not to waste time, and to make progress. So I want to keep tonight. If we approve or move to second reading with my amendment, it's still, we're not wasting anything. We still have the opportunity. If we don't, all we're doing is eliminating our options. Like, yes, you can say we're being patient. You can say, you can use all these other euphemisms, but really we're just eliminating our options. So I hope this council doesn't eliminate all of our options.
Thank you, Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. The HDC doesn't look at structural. Typically, the HDC, like when you present before the HDC, do you get into whether or not the building will continue to stand after changes?
No, sometimes we'll ask questions, like, you know, if you're removing this wall or adding this addition, you know, are you sure that it's going to be okay? But no, like I said, we're not structural engineers.
Okay. And then at a recent meeting, didn't our chief building inspector recommend that a building was not safe, and the HDC overruled that?
We haven't overruled it. It's a totally different project, a totally different topic. It's still ongoing. We're still in discussions.
Okay. But the chief building inspector said that this.
I just spoke with him today. We're still working with him on that project.
All right. And then I guess I don't see the need to not go forward to second reading for several reasons. When we referred this to the planning board and the HDC, we did it with the date certain. At the last planning board meeting, the issue was tabled. I think if we don't push forward and keep the pressure up, it's just going to drag on. So same as Councilor Cook's issue did. The other one is, you know, I would be in favor of it because I think Councilor Blaylock came with a really good suggestion, which is slate roofs and wood shingle roofs, which are clearly unique and different than asphalt shingles, and in my mind are actually historic, would be protected. And then asphalt shingle roofs, which I don't think are much more historic than solar panels, would not be given this elevated status. And the other thing that I think is important that it seems to be glossed over a few times is this is for flush-mounted solar panels. So this is not for solar panels that are at an angle different than the roof. This is for, you know, there are design requirements in the proposed amendment. And then finally, aren't there at the planning board level rules for solar panels, such as there has to be a certain gap around the upside of the roof for, say, the fire department, and you know, there are some regulations that the city would hold for solar panels, just as we do in areas outside of the HDC.
There are building code regulations that the planning board doesn't do building codes.
Okay.
There are also independent, and we are working on adding additional opportunities for solar panels in other parts of the city. The staff has been working very diligently on this topic with us, so we'll be coming with more soon about that, so you can see it.
So I guess my comment to that is if we remove the HDC oversight on asphalt roofs, there's still city level oversight on solar panels. It doesn't remove oversight completely.
Thank you, Councilor Bagley. Councilor Cook, is that a question?
No,
Or
Your
comment?
Honor, I was going to say, Councilor Bagley's comment that there's still city review is actually not accurate. People are allowed then to put solar panels on their roofs by just asking for a building permit to put a solar panel. And if the inspector approves it, like the inspector would approve any building permit, then they would be allowed to do it. So there isn't really a review beyond our building inspector. One of the reasons I shared a concern is a lot of individuals use the engineering company or engineer that's associated with the solar panel company to determine appropriateness of putting solar panels on the roof and where to put them. And it's really hard to believe that that's an independent assessment of structural integrity when it comes to solar panels on roofs, and without expertise necessarily in our inspectors on construction of old homes, then you're relying on the homeowner's knowledge of their antique home to know that they need to get advice from an engineer. So it's risky, is what I'm saying.
Thank you, Councilor Cook. Councilor Blaylock.
Your Honor, thank you. I'll just point out that the fire department, we do have life safety codes, and the building inspection department has building safety codes as well. So we do have those, and if we think our inspection department needs more staff members or something, maybe that's something we need to address.
All right. Some things here. Thank you both. I think I just had 2 questions, and you guys can get off the hot seat. Thanks so much for being here and answering our questions. One, the HDC doesn't regulate any other utility, or does it?
Like heat pumps and things we do look at. I don't
Utility,
know.
I guess, in terms of like being connected to the grid or
no.
gas or...
No, we look at mechanicals, but not utilities.
Okay. And then I guess I would share the public way seems how we, I would love for the definitions for, I guess, administrative approval might require some other changes to how we currently do things so that it could be used on new applications, which means to me. But in terms of having, I guess the term would be exemptions from a staff approval standpoint, is that correct? Like there would be exemptions so staff could approve that. Seems like the way to go. We currently have that in terms of the regulations now in terms of numbers, like 20 feet from, like, I think for me it would have to be, at least on the base level, something that says from the physical address, like so it's not, a different street that's viewed, and have numbers associated in terms of 20 feet back from that. There has to be some sort of number on there because the conversation around Chairman Chellman?
It does say the principal frontage of the building, but I made a note of Councilor Denton's comment, and this is something that I've discussed with Chair Reagan about maybe having some additional quantification of some sort, like the existing 20 feet. That can come up next week at public hearing for sure.
So, because I guess the goal should be of anybody looking to put solar panels would be to preserve the aesthetics of the HDC, to avoid having to go before the HDC because they fit all the criteria that staff can very clearly say this does not need any sort of review. That has to be as black and white. That's why I liked Councilor Blaylock's just asphalt shingles, and looking here online I figured out that asphalt shingles were invented in 1905. They became ubiquitous in the 1930s. Solar panels happened to be invented in 1954, believe it or not, and became more ubiquitous in the 80s as technology drove down the cost, and certainly in the 90s and 2000s. So we could punt this for 50 years and it would be moot because they would be historic. And that is probably, and then I guess the point of we don't notice asphalt shingles because they are ubiquitous. I was driving down my neighborhood. It's not in the historic district, but I was looking because I was looking to see like how many, and I did not notice any of them until I started looking. And I do think that if they were everywhere, they would be ubiquitous and they would be no different than an asphalt signal. But those are the questions that I had. Thank you. And if there's one more.
No, I just wanted to say for the administrative approval and how that's set up, the first section of administrative approvals does specifically say previously approved applications. This is like number 2. So it doesn't follow that first one. It is a totally different section and category of administrative approval. So that's why we still need to go back and fix number 1 and make that clear. But just to say that it doesn't necessarily follow that it has to be pre-approved.
Okay. Thank you, Regan. Thank you, Chairman Chellman, or Chairperson Rudig and Chairman Chellman. Are there any other questions of the council among ourselves before? And you guys can sit down. Thanks so much. Any other questions of the council before we?
Can we give a reminder of what motion is on
I think the motion that we have on the floor is whether or not to pass Councilor Blaylock's amendment to this, which would be to make it clear that it's removing or limiting, or the conversation to cedar and slate roofs.
Move to amend, yep.
Yep. Do you want to read it?
If you,
Yeah. So it'll read after the amendment, solar panels flush mounted to rooftops made of materials other than slate or wood of existing structures which do not require other alterations to existing structures. So that would be exempt from a certificate of approval.
Okay. Counselor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I wanted to say that I'm going to vote against this, not because I oppose it if this is the language we end up with, but I oppose the language as it is overall and discussing it now before we discuss planning board. So I'm going to vote against this, and I'm going to vote against the initial motion as well.
Okay, so just want to clarify. So if we had, so I guess, you know, what trying to get is, I would like to avoid fights that are not necessary. Like, I don't necessarily think this second reading fight is a fight, because we'll take amendments from that. But I'm curious, if we pass these motions and made it clear, if that would get enough of the council then to delay first reading until the next, so we would have it very clearly stated that asphalt and architectural asphalt shingle roofs are going to be exempt from solar panels, to make that absolutely clear, and then we can still have another, so could we amend the motion to, and there would be require Councilor Denton and Councilor Blaylock to agree to amend the motion to pass this amendment to the motion and delay passing of first reading until the 16th. So if we all, I want to make sure that if we believe in this motion, we can be clear about believing in this motion to provide clarity to that, and then we can listen to the feedback and be very clear to the planning board and HDC.
Can I make a suggestion just for clarification, that you vote on the motion to amend the proposed ordinance first, and then vote on whether or not you're going to pass first reading?
Yeah, so these are not linked. If we believe in this motion, we can vote to support removing asphalt and architectural shingles roofs from this, and then we could vote up or down whether or not we're going to delay it another 2 weeks. So they're not connected in that way. Okay. Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. The reason I'm voting against this is it goes against what we were just told by the HDC chair and the planning board chair around where and when they would place it. They didn't make an exclusion specifically for asphalt shingles. So this actually goes against their guidance.
can we just call it?
Okay. Councilor Blaylock.
I'll just, thank you, Your Honor. I just want to remind our council what our goals are, the goals that we voted on in January. The number one goal was housing and lowering the cost of housing. Having members of our community have to come before a commission to ask for permission to put solar energy so they can save more money is not helping them save money and making their housing less affordable. Our number two goal was sustainability and climate change. Nowhere in our goals was preserving the view of asphalt shingles. I'll just remind everyone.
Thank Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll support this because I think it's kind of made it very clear what we're preserving, what we're not preserving, and it's going to encourage our citizens to do solar panels. And we heard the presentations tonight that were great from all the middle school kids. But every one of those would be a CIP item. As the mayor mentioned, over $10,000, but most of them were, $1 million or more. Here's a chance for the city of Portsmouth to create renewable energy, and it doesn't cost the taxpayers a dime because the homeowners would be doing it, not the city. So why I fully support that the city should move forward with, solar panels. I think if we have residents that want to tackle climate change and put solar panels on their roof, and they're not slate or wood roofs, then we should be getting out of the way.
Any other questions, Council? Okay, I will just state it's the first time that I've sat here and I've listened to anybody say that we should be more like Massachusetts in anything that we do. So that's a first, and I'm certainly I'll take that one. Two, the tie always goes to the runner, and the runner in this case is the homeowner. And so I want to make sure that we are as clear as possible that if it's hard for us to decide, I trust the members of the Historic District to make that determination on their own. So I will support the removal of asphalt shingled roofs. I think that's clear. And I'm open, after viewing this, to hearing what the HDC and the planning board come up with. If it's a better idea, that's why I'll vote to have this delayed for another 2 weeks to hear what the alternative could be to that. You know, maybe it's a better view, but to remove this from asphalt single roofs only because asphalt are 50 years older doesn't make a whole heap of a lot of sense to me when I think that this is a very clear thing and everything else doesn't seem to be clear. So with that, roll call vote on the amendment to remove asphalt singles from purview.
Assistant Mayor Kelly?
No.
Counselor Tabor?
Yes.
Counselor Cook?
No.
Counselor Denton?
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock?
Yes.
Counselor Bagley?
Yes.
Counselor Moreau?
No.
Counselor Lombardi?
No.
Mayor McEachran?
Yes.
Passes 5-4.
Now on to whether or not we pass the motion or a motion to delay.
The motion is to pass first reading and schedule second reading and public hearing for June 3rd.
Okay, well, a motion delay would supersede, a motion to postpone would supersede this motion.
Right. But somebody would need to make that. to
Councilor Bagley?
postpone.
Your Honor, I would encourage Councilor Denton to revise his motion to delay, because I think if we vote down the motion for first reading, we kind of throw away the motion we just voted on as well.
And I will make that amendment if the second agrees.
I'll agree.
Just want to be clear, this means that what's currently in front of us, what we've been discussing since January, is what's going to appear when it comes back in front of us. And what the planning board and HEC are working on can be offered as amendments to that.
Could I just maybe be helpful, to make a point? If this passes first reading and goes to second reading for June 3rd for a public hearing, if you pass that tonight, then you'll meet all your notice requirements for the public hearing on June 3rd. And at second reading on June 3rd, you'd be able to take into account all of the whatever changes or recommendations come from the public hearing at the planning board on the 16th, I think it is, of this month. But you'd still be on track with the second reading, and you can amend at that point. But I don't know if that's helpful, but that process-wise, you
That
don't
was my
have to.
original
Right.
thing that I said.
And I think, and just to clarify, the only reason why we want to work and listen to everybody, the only reason is if the amendments brought forward at the next hearing by the HCC and the planning board, if they're not, better than what we have in front of us, then we've moved forward. We didn't delay. We've been pushing this ball. We've delay. I hate to keep doing that, but I want to be respectful and I want to hear from everyone. But at the same point, we're not eliminating it. By delaying, we could be wasting a month. If we pass it, we're definitely not wasting another month, and we can make changes at the second reading.
Okay. System Mayor?
Thank you, Your Honor. I would support postponing this because I would hope that the chairs that are here have heard the conversations and the debates that are happening up here. And, I think we owe it to them, and we cannot work in silos, to to absorb what has been said here today and clear in the message that is clear from some of the counselors of what they're hoping to see. And I would assume that we potentially will see some changes to the recommendations that they have brought forward, and recommendations that or changes that could come from the public hearing. So, which is why I would vote to not move forward on first reading. I think it's clear we all want to get this done. We all don't want to be a city underwater and want renewable energy. We just are looking at different paths on getting there. And so I think we can get there. I know that I understand the frustration of, that it has been going on since January, but we all know that things in the world of municipal government move slow. We have a CTE that's 25 years old. We have pipes that are 100 years old. So I think in relative comparison, we are moving forward ideally with an ordinance that will be able to be in place for the next 30, 40, 50 years and adapted through time.
Councilor Bagley.
Thanks, Your Honor. I would support either, but I think as it's currently amended, we're delaying, and I think that has more support of the council. So I would say that we should keep it as is instead of moving it back to what it was originally.
Councilor Moreau.
I just feel like that we don't hold first readings until we actually have planning board recommendations on zoning changes, and therefore on zoning specifically, I think that we should wait and postpone first reading until June 3rd.
We waited a year for land use recommendations.
You could do.
City Attorney.
Is there
Not enough
not enough notice for the first reading?
Not enough notice in the first reading of June 3rd.
Correct me if I'm wrong,
That's
City
the
Clerk,
clerk.
but the reason Kelly put
That
June
was for
30th
second
was
reading.
for second reading. Could we put
First reading.
reading for May 20th? We could. There's no notice requirement.
There's no requirements for noticing for a first reading, but keep in mind that a public hearing requires 10 clear days, not including the date of advertisement and the date of the meeting. So keep that in mind. And also, they have changed requirements in terms of timing with the Portsmouth Herald. So
Okay, we're going to lose a week, but that's fine. So as amended, it is to delay first reading until May 20th.
May
June
20th?
3rd.
No, May 20th is the first reading that we will have after the public hearing of the planning board on May 16th, correct? Councilor Morrow.
Yes, but I don't know that we would have enough time with the Thursday night meeting to be able to get the recommendation back for May 20th. That's why the legal department, when I spoke to them, suggested postponing first reading to June 3rd. It was
She's
based off of
correct.
the notice.
We'd have to delay the issuance of the packet
Yes, right.
for the May 20th meeting if we were to take into account
Right.
the work done Thursday night, May 16th.
Delay the issue of the,
Packet to the
Packet.
council and to the
I think it
general
would be
public.
difficult to get the
Consider
packet out.
both.
We couldn't get it out on Thursday. We'd have to wait until Friday, and then legal would have to have time enough to
That's true.
get
We're gonna
that
get it into the packet.
prepared
Sorry.
as well. So I'm not sure if
Can we do
one
that?
day would,
We're not going to have time to do that.
That's not going to work.
So June 3rd.
yeah, that's,
That was legal department's advice to me when I spoke to them about it.
okay, the delay to June 3rd.
I'm open to delaying till June 3rd, so long as this is what appears at first reading, and it would have to be amended with the planning board's recommendations.
Great.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll take a 10-minute recess.
16.
Welcome back.
Your Honor, I would look to suspend the rules to bring up item 16, approval of grants and donations. If I can get a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So we have, first, the acceptance of donation from Portsmouth Garden Club to the Senior Activity Center for Memorial Garden, the amount of $800.
I move to approve and accept the donation as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next is the acceptance of a memorial bench in honor of James Marchese.
Want me to read it?
Your job.
I move to accept the donation of a memorial bench in honor of James Marchese to be placed on Pierce Island.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next is the acceptance of a memorial plaque in honor of Joan Christie.
So moved.
Councilor,
Sorry, move to accept the donation of a memorial plaque in honor of former city librarian Joan Christie to be placed at the base of an existing tree at the library.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And finally, I believe, finally, we have the acceptance of donation from the National Society of the Colonial Dames of America in the amount of $2,500.
I move to approve and accept the donation as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all for the donations to the City of Portsmouth. It's greatly appreciated. Back to the regular portion, the regular scheduled programming. We have public hearing, second reading of ordinance. In this one, we have a presentation. There's a public hearing, second reading of ordinance amending Chapter 10, zoning ordinance, electrical vehicle charging stations, Article 4, zoning district and use regulations, Section 10.440, table of uses, Section 11.20, 11.21, 19.60, and 19.70. Article 8, supplemental use standards, Section 10.810 and Section 10.843. Article 11, site development standards, Section 10.1112.20 and 10.1112.32. And Article 15, definitions, Section 10.1530, terms of general applicability. All right, we have a presentation from Peter Stitt.
Good evening, Peter Stitt, Planning Manager. And the PowerPoint had, this was animated, so it was a little more exciting, but I had
That was animated?
This is the most,
We're all excited about
this
that.
is the most
Tuesday
exciting
parade in
slide.
Portsmouth.
So we're here for the second reading and public hearing for the electric vehicle charging amendments. Just to point out, our current regulations would allow an electric vehicle charging station as a principal use by special exception in the the general business, the Gateway 1, the business district, CD4W, and industrial districts, and they're currently allowed as an accessory use. We have seen them increase with our site plans that come in. People are adding them. We're seeing that consistently, and we also see homeowners are adding them to their residential properties. But these amendments will clarify and further allow this use in the city. The initial referral did come back in May of 2022 from Councilor Denton, and that original referral had the industry standards for level 1, 2, and 3 chargers. Next slide, please. The Planning Board began to review this in November of 2023, and during their course of their review, level 4 chargers were brought on board, and I think even now there's possibly level 5. So when the Planning Board reviewed these amendments, they took a broader approach to bring forth regulations that would not be outdated once they're adopted. So the proposed amendments on the next slide, adding a definition for electric vehicle, adding 2 uses, one electric vehicle fueling space A and fueling space B, And the main difference between the two is the type of electrical service. And then adding those uses to the use tables. And if you go to the next slide, for fueling space A, that is permitted in all zoning districts, and it uses customarily residential electric service, so something that you'd find in a single-family home. There are no setback requirements for any of the support equipment, and we've added it also in the accessory residential section in the ordinance as an accessory use to residential use. Fueling space B is customarily used with electrical service that is higher than what is found in the fueling space A. And the difference here, it's a permitted use in the general business and the industrial district, and allowed by conditional use permit in these other districts: mixed residential office, CD4L1, Gateway 1 and 2, CD4W, and OR district, which was an amendment made at the first reading of this. There is a 10-foot, because this type of use typically has larger infrastructure or support equipment, there's a 10-foot setback for that of such equipment. And next slide. We do count these spaces as towards the parking requirement, and there was another addition made at the first reading to further clarify that. These amendments also revise the definition of motor vehicle service station. Currently, we have motor vehicle service station as a use, and in our definitions, we have 3 types of motor vehicle service stations, which are not laid out in our use table. So we've consolidated the 3 types into just one definition, and then added language to further clarify electric vehicle fueling provisions. At the first reading, the council also made a motion to send a letter to the Pease Development Authority to ask them to request that they add provisions in their regulations for electric vehicle charging. And that is the gist of these amendments that are before you for second reading, and I'll take any questions if you have them.
Are there any questions of the council? Peter?
All right.
Let's see. Where did I put this? All right.
Actually, I do have one question, if I may.
For Peter, or just of the
Well, in
proposed?
general, I guess my question is that, do we have the electrical infrastructure to implement this? I mean, or are we going to have to wait to implement this to get that infrastructure?
I think it depends where you are in the city.
Well, in general, yeah, of course, wherever you are in the city.
Right.
But, yeah.
Definitely for the residential use. I mean, it's just standard.
Yeah, it's standard 220.
Right.
But the higher voltage ones, it's not. I guess
Downtown
the question
might be a problem?
asking about how the infrastructure projects are progressing along with this.
I don't know if the other Peter can speak to that, but I think it depends where you are in the city.
I think you're
It
talking
might be Peter Rice, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the
That was
Peters.
the other. That was the. I meant the other Peter. Third Peter.
Still going to give it a try. Peter Rice can help and bail me out. But I think the answer to your question
This is
is
the first time we've had all 3 Peters.
Peter Cube.
tell me how I do, Peter. This just puts the ability to put these stations in place. The infrastructure will come along with it. There are places where there's challenges, certainly downtown, but I think this is just getting it in place so we can do it.
Okay, so this is preparing for the availability in some places.
It's making it very clear that you can do it, and then you can only do it if you have the power to do it. So,
Okay.
yep.
All right.
Councilor Bagley?
I was just going to say that in my work, that people need 3-phase power all the time, and that's really, you go to Eversource and they say you can have it, or no, you can't have it.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a country, there's a lot of demand for electricity and to improve electrification and transmission delivery. Eversource is not going to go out of business if they're in the business of providing that. Certainly over the next 30 years, that is going to be a big aspect of what they have to do.
I will add, just in general, for general site plan development, we usually require a will serve letter for utilities, so Eversource would provide a letter that they can provide. That's just a general practice for site plan approval.
All right. Now we'll open up to the public hearing. Are there any members of the public speaking to, for, or against the proposed changes to the electrical vehicle ordinance?
None on Zoom, Your Honor.
None on Zoom. Closing the public hearing. Is there any additional council questions or deliberations?
Your Honor, I move to pass second reading and schedule a third and final reading at the May 20th, 2024 City Council meeting.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Your Honor, I motion that we suspend the rules to bring forward and hold third reading now.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And, Your Honor, I move to pass third reading tonight. Is that
Yeah, pass third reading. Yeah, you just say that. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
I would like to thank staff. I know this took some time, but I am pleased with the outcome, and hopefully organizations will look to Portsmouth and this ordinance and start installing some level 3 chargers.
Thank you, Councilor Denton, for the work on this, and staff for making this a reality, the planning board for bringing this back to us, and for the efforts of concerned citizens to make sure that this is a possibility. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, on to city manager's items which require action.
Thank you, Your Honor. And as a follow-up to the conversation on EV charging stations, you'll be very happy to know Peter Rice just shared with me that the cabinets we ordered almost 2 years ago to be placed in the Bridge Street lot are being shipped on June 10th from St. Louis, not from somewhere further than that. So hopefully within the fiscal year, we'll see them placed into service. So that is good news.
There you go.
Item number one would be bringing to you the Planning Board recommendation on home occupation amendments, which the Planning Board took up at their April 25th, 2024 meeting. And the initial amendment allowed up to 2 clients at one time for a home occupation 1 or 2 category. The Planning Board heard from several members at their public hearing that they would be in favor of any changes that would allow client visitation for a home occupation. And as such, the Planning Board added language to allow up to 6 clients to a home occupation 2, and to change the use tables where a special exception is currently required to a conditional use permit. The Planning Board voted to recommend to the City Council to hold the first reading on the zoning amendments for home occupation as presented tonight at your May 20th, 2024.
Your Honor, I move to schedule first reading of the proposed zoning amendments regarding home occupation at the May 20th, 2024 City Council meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilor Moreau?
I think that the planning board did a really good job. We had a lot of thoughtful conversation around how we could accommodate more without having to make some major changes around home occupation. And this was a really simple way to be able to have a public hearing. If you want more than 2, then come tell us why, and we'll give a public hearing and an opportunity for everyone to speak. And I think it's a really good resolution.
Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I wanted to thank the Planning Board for the work that they have done on this and for listening to a lot of artists that came forward and asked for this conditional use permit option. I think that people were very excited to see that the Planning Board was already thinking ahead on this, and I commend the Planning Board and the Planning Board Chair for doing so. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right.
Thank you. Item number 2 is a second report back on the request for a water taxi brought forth initially at the January 16th meeting for a commercial water taxi business to use the docks at Prescott Park. And legal provided feedback that it would not be in keeping with the will, and that permitting a commercial use of Prescott Park would be a change in terms of the gift restrictions. The acting director of the AG's office charitable trust unit tended to agree, and as such, the legal department went back to the drawing board, had a conversation with the water taxi owner. We shared the Attorney General's opinion, and after several discussions, legal staff recommended and the water taxi operator agreed to revise the request to you to permit water taxi drop-off and pickup at the Robert P. Sullivan Boat Launch at Pierce Island. And that is something we can effectuate with your approval.
I'd move to permit Mr. Como's water taxi service to drop off and pick up passengers only at the Robert P. Sullivan Boat Launch at Pierce Island, and to grant the city manager authority to negotiate a license agreement for this request.
Second.
Any discussion? Assistant Mayor.
This may be obvious, but I just want to clarify for the record. Within this potential license agreement, insurance requirements would be required to the same. Are we looking at the same type of insurance requirements that we do for outdoor dining on a sidewalk? The same type of liability levels, or what are?
We'd ask Primex what they would recommend, yeah.
Thank you.
Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. And just a clarifying question. So for this particular water taxi, we're approving it, and if somebody else had a water taxi, they would go through the same process?
We would consider that request as well, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, this isn't specific to any one operator, right? It's simply to allow the operation to exist at this boat
This is an operating agreement between
Right.
us and this guy.
This specific.
Sure, but sorry, I'll rephrase. What we established through the conversation with this individual and this LLC is that this could be acceptable at the Pierce Island boat launch, where there's ample parking, et cetera. And if somebody else would want to do this and compete with this person, it's not we won't be operating an exclusive right to provide this.
Correct.
Okay.
Cool.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you. The last request tonight is a request to schedule a community policing facility work session. The working group has made significant progress and is ready to advance a conversation and a conceptual design following along with the hybrid model here at the upper campus of the municipal complex. And that would be for the next council meeting, May 20th at 6 p.m., so that you all could review the plans and progress updates made to date.
Move to schedule a work session regarding the community policing facility on May 20th at 6 p.m.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
All right, we're on to the consent agenda.
Your Honor, I move to adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next is presentations and written communications. We have email correspondence.
Your Honor, I move to accept and place on file.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, a letter from Katie Ross, per Pure Bar, Portsmouth, requesting permission to hold a silent yoga class at Prescott Park on Friday, June 21st, 2024 at 6 a.m.
Move to refer to the city manager authority to act.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next is a letter from Jean Eno, Bucavina Cuisines, requesting the waiving of fees and grant Chef Oksana Karcha permission to sell food on Pleasant Street to raise funds for Ukraine on the 4 dates, May 19th, June 16th, July 14th, and August 25th, from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m.
I move to refer to the city manager with authority to act.
I second.
Any discussion? Just a quick one. Have we, in terms of raising funds and the permission or to sell food, I'm assuming that there will be some sort of, if we're waiving the fees, there'll be some sort of registered nonprofit that these funds will be deposited to? Is this reasonable in how we typically do charity events and the waiving of fees?
I would assume that the funds for Ukraine are funds that are going forward through a nonprofit.
Okay, as long as that's understood. Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just I wanted to ask for a distinction here, and if we make a distinction between a request like this and a food truck request.
No what request?
Yeah, what's the difference?
Oh.
Well, we'll find out after.
One's a nonprofit.
Oh, I think because you're indicating you're approving this for the benefit of a nonprofit and a charitable purpose.
I think I would be interested on a potential report back for not necessarily food trucks, but street vendors. I know we used to have a couple in town.
Used to get hot dogs.
Used to get
Remember those water
sausages.
dogs?
They were
Those
so
were pretty good.
But because I think potentially if we have an ordinance or don't have an ordinance, things like this, making sure they go through the health department and are properly insured and all of the things that any food sales has to go through, even packaged food sales that are prepared.
We can provide that report back on both street vendors and the nonprofit that would be the beneficiary of this particular fundraising effort.
Thank you.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, a letter from Herbert and Jeanette Lloyd requesting a landscape license agreement for the maintenance of city-owned property located at 5 Ruth Street.
Your Honor, I move to refer to the city manager with authority to act.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next is a letter from Elizabeth Browder regarding gateway zoning.
Your Honor, I move to accept and place on file.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we're on to the council. First, I will save you from reading the entire letter. I can be equally as long-winded in written prose as I can just speaking. But the gist of the letter from the SAU 52 communities was a direct result from members of the community that asked why Portsmouth is the only one doing focusing on affordable housing. I would assume, was that?
I said, but we're not.
Oh, I would assume that many other communities are, and in research of the PHA and the creation of the PHA, which is a state entity that is created through it's a public housing authority that happens to be named the Portsmouth Housing Authority. So PHA often, gets confused that they're not an arm of the actual state of New Hampshire. Allows us, in addition to all these things that I've highlighted that has been great work of the Housing Committee as well as the former Land Use Committee, I've asked for any other community to report back efforts that they're already undertaking by May 20th at their next City Council meeting, and to point out that the PHA is not bound by the city limits of Portsmouth. In fact, up to 6 miles from the city, PHA is licensed through the state to be able to build permanently affordable housing. So if there is an area in one of these communities, whether it be municipally owned or a private landowner that would like to partner with the PHA to build permanently affordable housing with the federal grants that are available through the PHA, we would love to connect them and remind them that the date for preliminary actions is June and the final applications are due August 30th of this calendar year for such actions. This is just informational, but I wanted to make the council aware. Councilor Moreau?
Might I share this with the Rockingham Planning Commission?
Certainly. We should have probably included them. They were out there on the bike ride yesterday that was super cold. But yes, would be happy to do that and connect them with our Portsmouth Housing Authority. And just a good reminder that our Portsmouth Housing Authority, again, we can't do that if another community has a housing authority or any other city has any other city. But it was specifically created by the state so that we could solve these issues regionally. And thank you for Jane Farini for looking at, going back to the actual legislation at the advice of our city attorney and finding that information out. Hopefully it proves useful to our neighboring communities that we're all in it together when it comes to solving affordable housing, especially when we share a high school with the communities. Next, appointments to be reconsidered. We have the reappointment of Luis Rodriguez to the Cable and Broadband Internet Commission. We have the reappointment of Stuart Shepard to the Conservation Commission. We have the reappointment of Daniel Brown to the Historic District Commission. We have the reappointment of both Michael Griffin and Dennis Soto to the Trees and Public Greenery. And next, the Blue Ribbon Committee appointments to be voted. These are all to the, nope, not all. We'll have Christian Burling, William Gatchell, Kenneth Hale, Colleen Ovechka, Chuck Ray, Peter Somchich to the Citywide Neighborhood Committee. I would wait a motion to, and Ben Camp to the Sister Cities Blue Ribbon Committee. I'd wait a motion from Councilor Tabor to move the appointment. Reading.
So
Too much reading.
No, I would move the appointments as presented, Your Honor.
Second.
Any discussion? Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to thank all these people for signing up to serve the city.
Next up, appointments to be voted.
We should vote for him.
Oh, we didn't vote?
We
All
didn't
right.
vote, and honestly, on our last agenda, we had an appointment to the planning board that doesn't appear to be on this list here.
Yep,
Right there.
it's
He's
it's
down.
next.
All right.
It's
Item.
number
Okay.
four.
So these are.
Oh, you're missing one.
Yep, so in the effort of trying to, we've had a bigger than usual outcome when it came to folks that wanted to serve on the Citywide Neighborhood Committee, which is great. But we had to have some tougher conversations to try to figure out who was going to serve. I'm happy that we were able to align on these. And also wanted to make sure that they're all reappointed at the same time. So we'll vote on these. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And then next, the appointment to be voted on Anthony Coviello as a regular member of the Planning Board.
I move to appoint Anthony Coviello to the planning board.
Second?
Any discussion?
I'm super excited.
You know, if
Thanks,
I was
Tony.
Tony, I would find, whenever I disagreed with you, I would find this video clip on YouTube. And I would just send you that you're so excited. But yes, Tony, former city councilor and all-around good guy when it comes to thinking about things pragmatically, following as an engineer, trained as an engineer. I think it's a civil engineer with an understanding of rules and how they're applied. I think especially in the going into the master plan will be vital. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And sadly, the acceptance of resignation, Aubrey Geller from the Sustainability Commission.
Your Honor, I move to accept the resignation with regret and send a letter of thanks for his service to the Sustainability Committee.
Second.
And I just want to add, during my hiatus from the Sustainability Committee, Aubrey joined, and there was a world of difference when I went back to it. So he made a huge contribution. I know that he has a heavier load, but I'm glad that he's still in my neighborhood.
I wanted to add my thanks to Aubrey for his work. I also had worked with him on a green buildings code, and his advice and his knowledge was vital to that effort. Thank you, Aubrey.
Great guy. Aubrey has been involved. The Sustainability Committee is a larger committee, certainly, and he has always had an active voice in that, and not just in this role, but in the community at large. He's always spoken up and carried with him a strong moral compass on what's right and wrong. So, Aubrey, we wish you well in your future endeavors and look forward to when you return again to support the city in a formal way, and know that you will do it informally, as is your nature. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, on to Councilor Tabor.
Thanks, Your Honor. I gave you a written update of the Energy Advisory Committee, and I just wanted to highlight that we have a work group around solar, appropriate for tonight's events. And Herb Lloyd, Betsy Blaisdell, and Peter Somchich, and they are working. They've reached out to the National Renewable Energy Lab, and NREL is very interested in helping communities do feasibility studies. And the first discussion was around either solar or wind, some renewable energy for our 2 wastewater treatment plants. And the federal government is putting incentive money towards resilience for wastewater treatment plants, so there could be a good opportunity there. And we talked about that with Peter Rice and other staff today, and we'll be getting back to you, we hope, soon about that with a proposal. That's it.
Thank you, Councilor Tabor. Now on to Councilor Denton.
I already spoke briefly to summarizing this case. I won't anyone to read it.
Okay, and we have Councilor Blaylock's agenda item already, as well with Councilor Moreau, and the approval of grants and donations. And now we're on to the city manager's informational items.
I will be as brief as I can, Your Honor. And first up will be Peter Rice with a very brief update on the community policing facility, knowing we will have a work session on May 20th. This is our commitment to bring an update to every council meeting.
And thus we get DPW Director Peter Rice at every council meeting.
That's right.
That's great. This is
Good
a
evening,
commitment,
Mr. Mayor,
Peter.
City Council. The city manager had requested scheduling the meeting for the 20th. You approved it, so we look forward to having an opportunity to talk to you about where we are at in the process. We are including enabling work to be able to put solar panels on the new addition. So that was one of the things that we saw the kids, the high school kids today speak to. So the opportunity will be good to be able to talk about how we got to the point where we're at. And it'll be a great opportunity to get some direction from you all in terms of how you would like to see moving forward. So look forward to the opportunity on the 20th to speak in further depth.
Not to steal any of the thunder on that, but will we have figures to discuss in terms of cost estimates at the 20th?
There will be refined, updated costs. So that'll be, I don't have those at the moment. There will also be some block diagrams and some three-dimensional diagrams. They won't be formal renderings, because until we have really settled on what the size of the massing of the building and the layout, we won't be able to put a pretty picture together so you can see what it'll look like on site. But what we're looking to do is take some photographs and superimpose a block in there so you can get from different perspectives of vision in terms of what what it would be from a massing standpoint. So,
thank you, Peter.
You're welcome.
Peter. Next up is a update on where we stand with the disposition of the Sherburne property, and we are working to advance the action voted on at the April council meeting, where council voted to approve that we work toward the official disposition of the property for the creation of permanent below market rate housing. I am working with staff from Planning and Sustainability and Legal and Procurement to draft an RFQ, or request for qualifications. We don't want to spend a whole lot of time. We want to get out on the street with an RFQ, and we will do that within the very short duration. The same set of folks is working on a quals-based RFP, if you will, for the South Meeting House. So we are very busy in procurement with both efforts. Number 3 is a report back on...
There's a couple of questions, and
Sure.
it might have been on what quals mean, but I'm assuming that means qualifications.
Sure. A quals-based RFP means it's...
Yeah, we all know. Yeah,
Okay,
qualifications.
sorry.
All right.
I go fast.
Councilor Tabor?
We discussed this at the Housing Committee, and a number of the members were concerned that the RFQ process for Sherburne fit within the time frame so that any of the nonprofit developers that we selected could get the federal tax credits, and the key date for that is August 1. So if there were anything to come to the council to approve, we've only got June 17th or July 15th for June and July meetings. So are you comfortable that we would have the RFQ process, the responses, and a selection around, well, certainly by July 15th?
I'm going to look to staff. Typically, do we get approval on an RFQ before we send it out?
I've meant the bidders that came back.
Right.
Besides
Well, we understand the sensitivity to time, so we will huddle and provide a much better, more in-depth update, perhaps even to tell you that the RFQ exists on May 20th.
Okay.
But that will be our goal,
Right.
to recognize that deadline.
Right, I'm just, if the council had to sign any kind of contract or letter of agreement. We've only got those 2 dates. So that was a concern of a number of members of the Housing Committee Thursday.
This may be a question for city manager or legal. And what RSAs dictate how long an RFQ needs to be open?
I'm going to have to.
There is no RSA. I think it's a
defer to
industry standard in the 2 to 3 weeks, depending on complexity of the document.
There we go.
That's my understanding. Suzanne is nodding, but maybe Suzanne wants to add something.
I know we've been working on sort of very preliminary drafts of these documents. I think a lot depends on what you're asking for, and that's kind of what we're struggling with. To the extent you want a lot of detail, or you want to, in the case of South Meeting House, look at financial stability or ability, that's going to take longer for both usually your proposers to propose. So you want to make sure you give them an adequate window, but it also takes a little more time to review if you're looking at that component as well. So that's just why it's a little tricky right now, but I think we're closing in, as the manager said, on getting some drafts together.
Right, yeah, thanks.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. My question is on the RFP process for South Meeting House. I know here at the council in the work session, we had discussed that this was more of the council making a decision on direction it wanted to go. So usually the council has nothing to do with the back end of the RFP process when those proposals come in. How will this process be different?
With South Meeting House?
Yes.
I don't know that it will, and why don't we bring updates on both to May 20th? I don't want to not misspeak, but I want to make sure I give as robust an answer as possible. And currently, legal is drafting consideration for that one as well. So I'll bring updates on both to May 20th.
Thank you.
Councillor Bagley?
Thank you, Your Honor. And just in hearing the discussion, I guess I would express my opinion anyway that I think the South Meeting House could take a back seat. You know, if staff time was limited, I'd much rather see us move more hastily with the, not hastily, more quickly with the Sherburne school disposition.
That is noted. All right.
Number 3 is a report back on the request made by Councillor Cook relative to historic designation. And I want to make sure I word this correctly to honor what Councillor Cook brought up previously. Staff spoke with Amy Dixon of the New Hampshire Division of Historical Resources, and we asked whether changes to our zoning ordinance to allow solar panels in the historic district would have any impact on our ability or anyone's ability for grants. She answered that she could not conceive of any way that this would be the case, and she did not think that it would compromise the designation of the historic downtown. We will stay in communication with her, and I'm not sure why that was funny, but we will stay in communication with her and continue to keep you updated.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you so much to the city manager for this update. I was really looking for how it impacts homeowners who are applying for grants that are National Register, they're in the National Register district and therefore designated for National Register.
Understood.
If they change the exterior of their home, which the National Register guidelines are pretty strict on that. So I'm wanting to know how it impacts
You just
them.
pulled that up, right? You just pulled up the interior.
Yep.
We can clarify that again with Amy, but Amy spoke to that in general, understanding we were asking not only as the city and as a district, but to individual applicants. Okay, item number 4 would be a memo in your packet provided by Deputy City Attorney Trevor McCourt relative to the tax deeded properties. Since we've brought this issue to the council, it was referred to Planning Board. And in the time that it was referred to Planning Board and unanimously recommended to come back here to be disposed of at public auction, the city has received a court order and the matter has been stayed. And at such time, while the order does not explicitly prevent the city from taking action, legal recommends that we avoid taking up this matter until such time as the stay is lifted. So what we would indulge the council is to hold on this matter until we have an update from court. And we don't know when that will be, but we hope it is soon.
Yep.
So,
I can answer any questions. All right.
and lastly, I would just give you a very brief set of highlights from April 18th PDA board meeting, which seems like a lifetime ago. But through the first 9 months of FY24, PDA operating expenses are down 10.5% with revenues on target. That is good news. The PDA has its own CIP for the remainder of FY24 through 30, which totals over $67 million, with $37 million or 20 projects supported by grant funding, and $30 million or 98 projects utilizing internal capital funding. $40 million of those improvements represent upgrades to the airport at Portsmouth, and $11 million represent improvements in general to the trade port. And I found this particularly noteworthy. The PDA CIP has no outstanding bonds or debt other than a $7 million line of credit. So they really only use the capital they have on hand and grant funding. And for the golfers in the group, the patio cover went up April 17th. All 27 golf holes were opened as of April 20th. The tent went up April 24th, and all leagues started play at the end of April. And the airport has been busier than normal with school vacation weeks for Mass, Maine, and New Hampshire. And NATO operations, including the Royal, Italian, and U.S. Air Forces, have used Portsmouth as a key transient technical stop. Portsmouth Airport hit the required minimum number of 10,000 enplanements as of March, which allows them to continue to remain eligible for FAA funding. Back in the day, there were times they could barely do this by the end of the calendar year, so this is a big achievement. The domestic arrivals hall at the airport upgrade has steel up and interior work taking place. And notably, the enterprise rental car outfit at the airport is seeing an increase, which is good for both the local and the regional economy. And if I could add a sixth informational item, you all got several inquiries about the status of the Hillside Greenleaf sidewalk today. And I shared this message with anyone who wrote out to all of us to remind folks it is in the capital improvement plan for FY25. We are working on interim steps, and we are doing some of this work in advance of actually getting the formal funding, which will come with the adoption of the budget. But things that need to come along with this work will include the survey, the design, and the easement procurements. And I believe there are 3 easements we need to seek. So we will move that along as quickly as possible, but it is probable that the construction of the sidewalk will not take place until the spring. What we can do now, and what Trees and Greenery is taking up this week, is the removal of a tree, and the removal of that tree will allow for passage along the grassy corridor where the sidewalk will eventually end up to be. So that is an update. It has been timely for that neighborhood, and I just want to provide that. Thank you.
Thanks, City Manager. Anything under miscellaneous? Councilor Moreau.
Just to let you know that the nomination committee for the Rockingham Planning Commission is putting my name forward as the chair to be voted on June 12th at our annual meeting.
Nice. Congratulations, if that's in order. You want that? Yeah. All right.
It's supposed to be voted, but I'm pretty sure that there's no one else being named as the chair.
No one else foolish enough, right?
Anything else worthy? All right, I will wait a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, Portsmouth.